6 Marines, 1 house, 6 hours of hell. They breached thinking it was routine. The door collapsed behind them. They were sealed in with an unknown enemy, murder holes in the walls, and a heavy machine gun outside trying to tear them apart. No escape, no rescue, just survival. This is the true story of the Hell House, Fallujah, 2004. The battle they don't teach you about. The kind of close-quarters nightmare that breaks men in ways bullets never could. I'm going to tell you what happened in that house. Every second, every bullet, every decision between living and dying. And then I'm going to tell you about the war that never ended. The one Jake Morrison fought for the next 20 years inside his own mind. Subscribe if you want the real stories, the ones that hurt, the ones that matter. Let's go.
The diesel generators hummed their monotonous song outside the commandeered Iraqi house, a sound that had become as familiar as breathing. Corporal Jake Morrison woke to it every morning now, that mechanical drone mixing with the distant percussion of mortar fire, always distant, never close enough to matter, but never far enough to forget. He opened his eyes to pre-dawn darkness. The ceiling above him was cracked plaster, stained with water damage and decorated with Arabic script he couldn't read. Probably prayers, maybe curses. He'd stopped wondering which. His hands found the cigarette pack on the floor beside his sleeping mat before his brain fully engaged. Muscle memory. Third deployment muscle memory. The kind of automation that kept you functional when thinking too hard could break you. He lit up, the flare of the match painting shadows across the room where 5 other Marines were going through their own morning rituals. In silence, the smoke tasted like shit. Everything tasted like shit in Fallujah. The cigarettes, the water, the MRE coffee that Doc was already brewing on a portable stove in the corner. Even the air had a taste, dust and diesel and something burnt that never quite left your tongue. Jake's hands shook slightly as he took another drag. Not fear, not yet, just exhaustion. The kind that settled into your bones after 96 straight days in a city that wanted you dead. 96 days of patrols and firefights and waiting for the bullet with your name on it. His body had forgotten what real rest felt like. Around him, the squad moved with the efficiency of men who'd done this too many times to count. PFC Marcus Ghost Chen sat cross-legged on his mat, field stripping his M4 rifle for the 3rd time since midnight, the quiet rifleman who never spoke unless he had something worth saying. His fingers moved with the precision of a watchmaker, checking each component with obsessive care. The weapon was cleaner than it needed to be, but in Fallujah, there was no such thing as too clean. Lance Corporal Tommy Footloose O'Brien hummed under his breath while loading magazines, some off-key melody Jake didn't recognize. The kid from Boston never shut up, whether it was words or music or that constant nervous energy that leaked out of him like static. His fingers drummed against the ammunition as he worked. Tap, 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 a rhythm only he could hear. Across the room, Lance Corporal James Preacher Williams knelt beside his rack, lips moving in silent prayer. 19 years old and already talking to God like they were old friends. The saw gunner from Alabama carried a pocket Bible in the same pouch as his extra ammunition, and Jake had seen him read it by red lens flashlight during every lull in the fighting. The kid prayed before every breach, after every firefight, probably in his sleep. Maybe it helped. Maybe God was listening. Jake had stopped asking. Sergeant Doc Ramirez emerged from the corner with 2 canteen cups of instant coffee so strong it smelled like tar. 28 years old, Brooklyn-born, 3 deployments deep, and still the guy who kept them alive. He handed one to Jake without a word. The steam rose in the cold morning air. Jake wrapped his hands around the cup, letting the heat seep into his fingers. The coffee tasted like battery acid cut with sand, but it was hot and it was caffeinated, and that made it nectar. He drank it in silence, watching the others gear up through the gray haze of cigarette smoke. The room reeked of an armory, gun oil and cordite residue, and the sharp chemical tang of CLP cleaner. Underneath that, the smell of 6 men who'd been living in their uniforms for days. Stale sweat, unwashed skin, that particular funk that body armor created when you wore it for 16 hours straight. Jake had stopped noticing it on himself. He only smelled it when new replacements showed up fresh from Kuwait, their uniforms still clean, and their eyes still bright. Those eyes never stayed bright long. Staff Sergeant Dane, Viking Kowalski, ducked through the doorway, his bulk nearly filling the frame. 32 years old, career Marine, Detroit-raised and corn-fed into a walking tank of a man. His jaw worked around a wad of Copenhagen, and his eyes, pale blue and perpetually calculating, swept the room in one practiced assessment. "Morning, ladies," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "Hope you got your beauty sleep because today's the day you earn your combat pay." Nobody groaned. Nobody made a joke. They just kept working, checking magazines, adjusting straps, settling plates into vests. The routine was almost meditative. Pull the plate from the carrier, check for cracks, slide it back in, secure the Velcro. The ripping sound of Velcro had become the soundtrack to their lives. Viking unfolded a hand-drawn map on the floor, crude sketches of city blocks, building outlines marked in pencil, threat assessments scribbled in the margins. Jake stubbed out his cigarette and moved closer, coffee still in hand. "House 47, Jolin District," Viking said, tapping a square on the map with a thick finger. "Intel says it's a weapons cache. We go in, clear it, catalog anything we find, and exfil. Routine clearance." Jake felt something cold slide down his spine when Viking said, "Routine." In Fallujah, nothing was routine. Routine patrols became ambushes, routine traffic stops became IED strikes, routine clearances became close quarters nightmares that left you wondering what the definition of routine had ever been. But he didn't say anything. None of them did. Viking's eyes knew what they were all thinking. He'd been doing this longer than any of them. "ROE is standard," Viking continued. "Positive ID before engagement unless fired upon. Watch for booby traps. Intel says this sector's been rigged before. Ghost, you're on overwatch when we stack. Preacher, Saw goes through the door, second right behind Reaper. Doc, your tail end, Charlie. Footloose, you're our breacher." Tommy grinned and cracked his knuckles, still humming. The kid loved explosives the way other people loved football. It was mildly concerning. "We mount up in 20 mics, Viking said. "Full battle rattle. This is a quick in and out, but I don't trust this city as far as I can throw it, so we go in expecting contact. Questions?" Silence. "Outstanding. Get your shit tight." The next 15 minutes passed in focused preparation. Jake pulled his interceptor vest over his head, feeling the familiar weight settle onto his shoulders. 40 pounds of Kevlar and ceramic plates that would stop an AK round, but felt like carrying another person on your back. He secured the cummerbund around his waist, adjusted the shoulder straps, tested the quick release. The vest had a smell, rubber and canvas and old sweat baked into the fibers. He loaded his magazine pouches methodically, 630 round magazines for his M4 rifle, loaded with 62 grain green tip ammunition, 180 rounds total. He'd learned to count ammunition the way broke college students counted dollars. Every round mattered. Every round could be the difference between walking out or being carried out. His helmet went on last, the advanced combat helmet with its weird spaceman shape and the padding that never quite sat comfortable. He adjusted the chin strap, feeling it dig into the soft skin under his jaw. The helmet made his head sweat within minutes, but it had saved more lives than Jake could count. He'd seen one with a perfect AK round embedded in the Kevlar, the Marine underneath walking away with a concussion instead of a funeral. In the pouches on his vest, 2 fragmentation grenades, 1 smoke, 1 flashbang, a combat tourniquet, his KA bar knife strapped to his chest rig, a small medical kit, a strobe light, a red lens flashlight, energy bars he'd never eat because the taste made him gag. And in the cargo pocket of his uniform, a letter he'd written to his mom 3 weeks ago and still hadn't mailed. Every time he went out, he thought about sending it. Every time he came back, he decided to wait one more day. He caught his reflection in a cracked mirror, leaning against the wall. A ghost stared back, 23 years old from Bakersfield, California, but the face looking back could have been 40. Sunken eyes with dark circles underneath. Skin weathered and dusty. A shadow of stubble he hadn't bothered to shave. He barely recognized himself anymore. "Mount up," Viking called from outside. The squad filed out into the November morning. The air hit Jake's face, cold and clean compared to the stale interior, carrying the smell of cooking fires and sewage from open gutters. The sky was that pre-dawn gray where you couldn't tell if it was getting lighter or darker. Somewhere in the distance, the call to prayer echoed from a minaret, the Arabic words rising and falling like a song from another world. Their Humvee waited in the courtyard, armored and ugly, covered in dust and scars from impacts. The gunner's turret stood empty. They'd rotate who stood up in the kill zone once they started moving. Jake climbed into the back, taking his position behind the driver's seat. His M4 rested between his knees, muzzle down, safety on but thumb ready. Always ready. Ghost slid in beside him. Preacher took the opposite side. Doc climbed into the front passenger seat. Viking took the driver's position. He never let anyone else drive. Said it was about control. Really, it was about trust. Footloose mounted the M240 machine gun in the turret, his legs hanging down into the crew compartment, upper body exposed to the Fallujah morning. The Humvee's engine roared to life, belching diesel exhaust. The vibration traveled through the seat and up Jake's spine. He'd spent so many hours in these things that the rumble felt like part of his own heartbeat now. They rolled out of the compound, joining a short convoy of 2 other Humvees, security element, and QRF if things went sideways. The streets of Fallujah unfolded around them like a fever dream. Buildings stood like broken teeth, walls pockmarked with bullet holes creating constellations of concrete stars. Black scorch marks from RPG impact streaked across facades. Every structure looked wounded, dying, or already dead. Windows gaped empty, some covered with tattered curtains that moved in the breeze like ghosts. The city had been beautiful once, Jake had heard. Now it was just a skeleton of what it used to be, picked clean and left to rot. Through the armored glass, he watched the streets pass. Empty. Too empty. Fallujah had 1 million people before the war. Now it was a maze of abandoned buildings and hidden fighters, every shadow a potential threat, every pile of rubble a potential IED. The civilian population had either fled or learned to stay inside when the Americans came through. Occasionally, a curtain twitched, eyes watched, always watching, judging, calculating, friend or foe, innocent or insurgent. There was no way to know until the bullets started flying, and by then it was too late for philosophical questions. Doc told a joke from the front seat, something about a Marine, a sailor, and a camel. Nobody laughed. Footloose hummed "Sweet Child of Mine" from the turret, off-key and missing half the words. Ghost cleaned his rifle scope with a lens cloth for the 3rd time that morning, even though it was already spotless. Preacher's lips moved in prayer, one hand on his saw, the other touching the pocket Bible in his vest. Viking's eyes never stopped moving, scanning rooftops and alleys and doorways with the methodical focus of a man who'd seen too many ambushes. His jaw worked the Copenhagen in a steady rhythm. The only sound from him was the occasional spit of tobacco juice into an empty water bottle. Jake watched his own reflection in the armored glass, a ghost superimposed over the ruins of Fallujah. Sometimes he wasn't sure which was more real. the face in the glass, or the city outside. Both felt equally distant, equally unreachable. The Humvee hit a pothole, jolting everyone inside. Jake's teeth clacked together. His rifle banged against his knee. The shock absorbers on these things were shot to hell after months of patrols. Every bump transferred directly into your spine. By the end of a mission, your whole skeleton hurt. They passed a mosque, its minaret still intact despite the destruction around it. Someone had spray-painted "Fuck Saddam" on the wall in English. Next to it, in Arabic script, someone else had written a response. Jake didn't need a translator to know it wasn't friendly. The smell of Fallujah leaked through the Humvee's seals, burning garbage, human waste, diesel exhaust, and something sweet and rotten that Jake had learned meant decomposition. Dead dogs, dead people, dead dreams. The city smelled like death wore cologne. 2 mics, Viking announced. Marine slang for 2 minutes, 2 minutes to target. Jake's heartbeat kicked up a notch. His palms started to sweat inside his gloves. He flexed his fingers on the rifle grip, working out the tension. His mouth went dry, despite the water he'd drunk that morning. The metallic taste of adrenaline began coating his tongue. This was the part he hated most, the approach. Once the shooting started, training took over and thought disappeared. But the minutes before contact, when your brain still worked and could imagine all the ways you might die, those minutes were psychological torture. The Humvee slowed, then stopped. Viking keyed his radio. Reaper 6 actual were 2 blocks out, dismounting and moving to objective on foot. Out. They piled out into the street, boots hitting pavement in a choreographed sequence they'd practiced 1,000 times. Footloose secured the M240 and dropped from the turret. The security element spread out, establishing a perimeter. The QRF stayed with the vehicles. Viking took point, moving in a tactical crouch. Jake fell in behind him, second in the stack. Then Ghost, Preacher, Footloose, and Doc bringing up the rear. They moved in a staggered column, spacing themselves to minimize casualties if an IED detonated or machine gun opened up. The street was dead silent, too silent. No children playing, no old men smoking outside cafes, no merchants hawking goods, just empty windows and closed doors, and the sense of being watched by 1,000 unseen eyes. Jake's senses went into overdrive. Every sound amplified, the crunch of gravel under his boots, the rustle of gear, his own breathing harsh through his nose. Every shadow might conceal a sniper. Every pile of trash might hide a bomb. His finger rested along the trigger guard of his M4, not on the trigger yet, discipline held until threat identified, but ready to move in a fraction of a second. They moved past a burned-out car, its frame blackened and twisted. The smell of old fire still clung to it. The windows of the surrounding buildings stared down like empty eye sockets in a skull. Jake scanned rooftops, left, right, the pattern drilled into him through countless patrols. The sky above was getting lighter now, pre-dawn gray shifting toward the weak blue of morning. Viking held up a fist. The column stopped. Ahead, maybe 30 meters, stood their target, a 2-story concrete structure with a blue door. Bars covered the windows. The exterior walls showed pockmarks from old gunfire, but the structure looked intact, ordinary, unremarkable. Just another house in a city full of houses. Jake stared at it, and something cold slithered through his gut. He'd learned to trust that feeling, the animal instinct that lived in the brainstem, the part of the brain that evolved to recognize danger before conscious thought kicked in. Something about the house felt wrong. He couldn't articulate why. The windows were shuttered like dozens of others. The door was closed like hundreds they'd breached before. Nothing objectively screamed trap, but his spine tingled anyway, and his testicles tried to crawl up into his body cavity. And somewhere deep in his DNA, a voice whispered, "Don't go in there." Viking signaled, "Stack on the door." They moved forward in silence, closing the distance. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs so hard, he was certain the insurgents inside could hear it. Sweat trickled down his spine despite the cool morning air. His mouth tasted like copper, the taste of fear that no amount of training could completely erase. They reached the house and pressed against the exterior wall. The concrete felt cold through Jake's uniform. Vikings stacked left of the door. Jake stacked right, point man position, first through the fatal funnel, first to die if this went bad. Ghost behind him, preacher behind Ghost, saw at the ready. Doc at the rear, already running through casualty scenarios in his head. Footloose moved to the door with his breaching charge, a strip of C4 shaped to blow the lock and hinges. The world narrowed to this moment. The blue door, the sound of his own breathing, the weight of the rifle in his hands, the smell of concrete dust and propane and something else he couldn't identify. Fear sweat, his own fear sweat. Viking and Jake communicated with hand signals only. No words needed. They'd done this dance dozens of times. Viking checked his watch, then held up 3 fingers. 3 seconds to breach. Footloose, pressed the charge against the door, stepped back, pulled the igniter. The fuse hissed. Jake flipped his night vision down over his eyes. The world turned green and strange. His finger moved from the trigger guard to the trigger, safety off. Controlled breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. Every muscle coiled. Viking mouthed 3, 2, 1. The charge detonated. The blue door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke and concrete dust. The shockwave punched Jake in the chest. The sound was catastrophic, even through his ear protection. A concussive crack that made his teeth rattle. "Move, move, move!" Viking screamed. Jake rushed through the smoking doorway, rifle raised, finger on trigger, night vision painting the interior in shades of chemical green. Training took over. Clear the corners, scan for threats, watch the ceiling, watch the walls, watch everything everywhere all at once. And then he saw it. The interior walls weren't normal plaster and drywall. They were reinforced concrete, thick, military grade, and cut into them at chest height, dozens of small rectangular holes, murder holes, firing positions built into the walls themselves. His brain had half a second to process this before the first muzzle flash erupted from his left. A voice screamed in Arabic from somewhere inside the walls, inside the fucking walls where humans shouldn't be, and the air filled with the distinctive crack, crack, crack of Kalashnikov fire. "Contact!" Jake screamed, his voice raw and breaking, and then hell opened up around him. The world exploded in chaos. Muzzle flashes erupted from the murder holes. Left wall, right wall, positions Jake hadn't even registered yet. The Kalashnikov fire was deafening in the enclosed space, a continuous roar that felt like it was tearing the air apart. Rounds cracked past his head, so close he felt the displacement, heard the supersonic snap, smelled the cordite wake they left behind. Jake's body reacted before his brain caught up. He fired at the nearest muzzle flash. 3-round burst, the M4 bucking in his hands. The green-lit interior through his night vision turned into a strobing nightmare of gunfire and smoke. He saw concrete chips exploding from the wall where his rounds hit, heard the metallic ping of ricochets, felt brass casings from his own weapon rain down on his helmet. Behind him, Ghost stumbled through the doorway and took around to his shoulder plate. The impact sounded like a hammer striking an anvil, a flat, brutal crack. The Kevlar stopped the bullet, but the kinetic energy threw Ghost sideways into the wall. He gasped, wind knocked out of him, eyes wide with shock. "Get in! Clear the fatal funnel! Move!" Viking roared from somewhere behind Jake, his voice cutting through the gunfire like a chainsaw through flesh. They couldn't stay in the doorway. The doorway was death. A narrow choke point where the enemy had pre-sighted their weapons, where every insurgent in the house could concentrate fire. Stand there for more than 2 seconds, and you were a corpse. Jake dove right, his boots skidding on the dusty concrete floor. He crashed behind a low barrier. Sandbags, he realized, his mind cataloging details even in the chaos. A fighting position, pre-constructed. This wasn't just a trap. This was a planned ambush, designed and built specifically to kill Americans stupid enough to walk through that door. Preacher came through next, his saw already roaring. The M249 sounded different from the M4s, deeper and angrier, a sustained buzzsaw scream that chewed through ammunition at 800 rounds per minute. The muzzle flash from the saw lit up the room like a strobe light. Preacher wasn't aiming at anything specific. He was just putting rounds down range, suppressing, filling the air with so much lead that nothing could move. The saw fire tore chunks out of the concrete walls, pulverized the murder holes, filled the air with dust and smoke and the smell of burning metal. Brass casings ejected from the saw in a golden stream, bouncing off the floor like rain on pavement. More AK fire answered from upstairs. Jake's night vision picked up movement on the ceiling, another murder hole, this one angled down. He fired up at it, full auto now, discipline gone, just survival. His rounds punched into the concrete, sparks flying where metal met stone. Something bounced down the stairs with a metallic clatter. Jake's blood turned to ice water. Grenade. Grenade! Someone screamed. Might have been him, might have been Viking, didn't matter. The cylinder tumbled down the last few steps and rolled across the floor, spinning like a top, wobbling toward the center of the room. Jake saw it through his night vision. An RGD-5, Russian-made, the kind that turned your insides to jelly if you were within the kill radius. Footloose appeared in the doorway, saw the grenade, and made a decision faster than thought. He kicked it. The grenade skittered across the floor, hit the wall, bounced toward one of the murder holes. Footloose dove on top of it. No, wait, he grabbed it, his hand closing around the metal sphere, and he shoved it through the murder hole into the wall cavity beyond. The explosion was muffled but devastating, a bass-heavy whomp that Jake felt in his chest cavity. The wall bulged outward. Dust and smoke vomited from the murder holes. Someone inside the wall screamed, a high, keening sound that cut off abruptly, but there had been 2 grenades. The second one detonated in the corner of the room. The shockwave hit Jake like a giant's fist, slamming him against the sandbag barrier. His ears went instantly silent, not ringing, just gone, replaced by a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. Shrapnel peppered the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Something hot stung his neck. He touched it, felt blood, couldn't tell how bad. Through the smoke and dust, shapes moved. Viking and Doc burst through the doorway, weapons up, scanning for targets. Viking's mouth was moving, shouting orders Jake couldn't hear through the auditory damage. The world had become a silent film, all action and no sound except that endless ringing. Jake shook his head, trying to clear it. His vision swam. The night vision had been knocked askew on his helmet. He ripped it up, relying on ambient light now. The room was chaos, smoke hanging in the air like fog, dust coating everything, bodies moving through the haze. Ghost was down, but moving. Doc was already on him, hands checking the shoulder plate, looking for penetration. Preacher was reloading his saw, his face a mask of concentration, lips pulled back from his teeth in something between a grin and a snarl. Footloose leaned against the wall, breathing hard, his shoulder bleeding where shrapnel had grazed him. Jake's hearing started to return in stages, first just the ringing, then muffled thumps like hearing the world from underwater, then gradually the sounds of the firefight resolving into clarity, radio chatter, breathing, the mechanical sounds of weapons being reloaded, and from upstairs, footsteps, movement, the enemy regrouping. Viking grabbed Jake's shoulder, squeezed hard enough to hurt. His pale blue eyes locked onto Jake's, checking for concussion, for shock, for that 1,000-yard stare that meant you'd mentally checked out. Jake nodded. I'm good. I'm functional. I'm still here. Viking's mouth moved. Clear the room. They pushed deeper into the ground floor. The front room was small, maybe 4 meters by 5 meters, barely large enough for all of them. One window, covered with a steel shutter from the outside, bars on the inside. No way out there. The only exits were the hallway leading deeper into the house and the stairs going up. And behind them, where the entrance had been, the doorway was gone. Where the blue door had been, where they'd stacked just 90 seconds ago, there was now a pile of rubble and twisted rebar. The walls on either side had collapsed, probably triggered by a secondary charge or structural weakness from the initial breach. Tons of concrete and brick sealed them in like a tomb. Jake stared at it, his stomach dropping into his boots. They were buried, trapped, no way out, except through the enemy or through exterior walls that looked thick enough to stop tank rounds. Fuck, Footloose whispered, his Boston accent thick with disbelief. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Viking was already on the radio, his voice steady despite everything. Actual, this is Reaper 6. We are trapped in objective building, taking heavy fire from interior positions. Entrance has collapsed. Need immediate QRF and breach support. Over. Static crackled. Then, Reaper 6, copy your traffic. QRF is 3 blocks south, taking heavy contact, unable to advance at this time. Working on getting you support. Stand by. Negative on standby. Viking snapped, his calm cracking for just a second. We are sealed in with hostile forces. We need breaching equipment and armor support now. How copy? More static. A different voice this time, higher up the chain. An officer, trying to sound reassuring and failing. Reaper 6, be advised QRF is pinned down by RPG and small arms fire, heavy enemy activity across sector. We're working to free up armor assets. Current ETA on heavy breach support is 6 hours. I say again, 6 hours. You need to hold position, and the transmission dissolved into static as another burst of AK fire from upstairs stitched across the ceiling. Plaster rained down. Jake ducked instinctively, even though the rounds weren't aimed at him. Yet. 6 hours. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. 6 hours until tanks could punch through the enemy lines, get to this house, and breach the exterior walls. 6 hours in a concrete box with an unknown number of insurgents who knew the layout, had prepared the battlefield, and wanted nothing more than to add 6 more American bodies to their propaganda videos. Jake did the math automatically. 6 magazines, 30 rounds each, 180 total. Minus the 60 or 70 he'd already expended. Call it 100 rounds left. 100 rounds, 6 hours. That was... He couldn't do the math. His brain was too scrambled, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't anywhere close to enough. Ghost groaned from where Doc was working on him. Status? Viking asked. Doc looked up, his dark eyes calm despite the chaos. Plate stopped the round, but impact cracked at least 2 ribs, maybe 3. He's mobile but in pain. No internal bleeding that I can tell, but I can't be sure without x-rays. Can he fight? Ghost answered for himself, his voice tight. I can fight. Viking nodded, already moving on to the next problem. He pulled out a small notebook, the same one with the hand-drawn map, and sketched the layout as he understood it. Ground floor, this front room, hallway leading back, probably more rooms. Second floor, occupied by hostiles, unknown number. We're in a fucking kill box. He looked at each of them in turn. Here's what we're doing. We clear the ground floor room by room, establish a defensible position, conserve ammunition, and wait for armor. Questions? Yeah, Footloose said, wincing as he pressed a hand to his bleeding shoulder. What happens if they decide to come down those stairs in force? 6 of us can't hold 3 entry points. Then we die like Marines instead of like cattle, Viking said flatly. Which means we make them pay for every inch of ground, every breath of air, every second we're still alive. You got a better idea? Silence. Didn't think so. Jake, you're on point for the hallway push. Ghost, you're overwatch on the stairs, despite the ribs. Anyone comes down, you mag dump them. Preacher, you're with Jake. Doc triage and then cover the window. Footloose, you're breacher, even with that shoulder. We move in 2 minutes, check your ammo, hydrate, and get your heads right. Jake checked his remaining magazines. 3 full, 1 half empty in the weapon. Call it 110 rounds. He redistributed them in his pouches, putting the fullest ones in the easiest to reach positions. His hands moved automatically through the familiar motions, while his brain tried to process the situation. They'd been in the house for maybe 3 minutes. 3 minutes, and they'd already burned through a third of their ammunition, suffered 2 casualties, and gotten sealed in with an unknown enemy force. This was worst-case scenario. This was the kind of situation that ended with 6 flag-draped coffins and a lot of official letters expressing regret. He took a sip from his Camelback. The water was warm and tasted like plastic, but it was wet. His mouth was desert dry, tongue sticking to the roof of his mouth. The adrenaline dump was making him shake, his hands trembling as he loaded a fresh magazine into his rifle. Combat cocktail, fear, adrenaline, exhaustion, and the coppery taste of his own blood from where he'd bitten his tongue. From upstairs, a voice called down in broken English, "American, you are trapped. No help is coming. You will die here today, inshallah." Viking didn't respond. He just spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the floor and chambered around in his M4. The metallic click-clack was answer enough. But the voice continued, almost conversational. "We have time. We have bullets. We have water, food, patience. What do you have?" This time, Footloose answered, "Fuck you," and fired a burst up through the ceiling. The return fire was immediate and overwhelming. AK rounds tore through the plaster and concrete, raining debris. One round punched through and caught Footloose across the shoulder, not the same one already bleeding. The bullet grazed him, tearing a furrow through the fabric and skin, but not penetrating deep. He gasped, stumbled, went down on one knee. "Cease fire!" Viking roared at Footloose. "What the fuck did I just say about conserving ammunition?" Doc was already moving, pulling Footloose to the corner, checking the wound. More blood, more bandages being used, more supplies dwindling. Doc worked fast, packing the wound with gauze, wrapping it tight. "Through and through superficial. You're lucky." "Don't feel lucky," Footloose muttered, his face pale under the dust and grime. Jake moved to the hallway entrance while the others dealt with Footloose. The hallway was a dark mouth leading deeper into the house, maybe 3 meters long, narrow, with doors on either side. His weapon light cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes dancing in the beam. The hallway smelled different from the front room. Older smells, cooking odors, something sweet and organic that made his stomach turn. He flipped his night vision back down, the hallway turning green again. Better. He could see the details now. Cracks in the walls, scuff marks on the floor, and a wire. Stretched across the hallway at shin height, barely visible even with night vision. Jake froze, mid-step, his boot hovering centimeters above the wire. "Stop! Don't fucking move!" Everyone froze. The room went silent, except for breathing, and the distant sounds of combat from outside. Other firefights, other Marines fighting their own battles. Doc crept forward with a red lens flashlight, keeping the beam low. He examined the wire, following it with his eyes to both walls. It was thin, almost invisible, the kind of tripwire that had killed more Marines than Jake wanted to think about. Doc traced it to the left wall, where it disappeared into a small hole. He pulled out a multi-tool, carefully cut the wire, then examined the hole. His face relaxed. "It's not connected to anything. Dummy wire. Psychological warfare." Jake's heart was trying to punch through his ribcage. A dummy wire. Not even a real booby trap, just something to make them hesitate, make them scared, waste time and mental energy on a threat that didn't exist. But the hesitation had cost them. The door on the left exploded outward. An insurgent lunged into the hallway, AK-47 blazing. The muzzle flash was blinding in the confined space. Rounds sparked off the walls, filling the air with concrete chips and the smell of gunpowder. Jake fired on instinct, 3 rounds center mass, the insurgent dropping like a puppet with cut strings. The AK clattered to the floor, still smoking, but before Jake could process the kill, before he could even take a breath, 2 more insurgents burst from the same room. Close quarters, less than 2 meters. Jake pulled the trigger. Click. Jam. His rifle had fucking jammed. Stovepipe malfunction, a spent casing caught in the ejection port, the brass casing standing vertical like a tiny middle finger to the concept of reliability. The insurgents were raising their weapons. Jake's brain screamed at his hands to move, tap, rack, bang, clear the malfunction, but his hands were frozen, time dilating, the world moving through molasses. Ghost screamed from behind him and fired over Jake's shoulder. The muzzle blast from Ghost's M4 was so close, it scorched Jake's ear. The heat, like touching a stove. The sound was catastrophic, loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage at this range. Jake felt the shockwave, smelled burnt powder and singed hair. His hair. The first insurgent's face disappeared in a spray of red mist. The second took 3 rounds to the chest and went down in a heap. Ghost kept firing, his rifle on full auto now, mag dumping into the doorway even as he screamed with pain from his broken ribs. The recoil was slamming the rifle back into his damaged chest, but he kept firing, kept screaming, kept putting rounds downrange until his magazine went dry. The hallway became a slaughterhouse. 3 bodies on the floor, blood pooling and mixing, the walls painted red, the smell overwhelming, copper and iron and bowels releasing and cordite all mixed together into a stench that made Jake's stomach heave. He cleared his jam, tapped the bottom of the magazine, racked the charging handle, the stovepiped casing ejecting with a musical ping, and moved forward, stepping over bodies still twitching. His boots squelched in blood. The sound was obscene. Preacher pushed past him, saw at the ready, and flooded the room with his weapon light. "Clear!" he shouted after a 3-second scan. The room was small, maybe 3 by 3 meters. A hole gaped in the floor, dark and reeking. A tunnel entrance now partially collapsed. The insurgents had been living in the walls and the tunnels, a network of spider holes and fighting positions that turned the house into a 3-dimensional battlefield. Viking kicked aside one of the bodies, checking for weapons. "They're coming from below, probably a whole network down there. We need to seal that hole before more come up." Footloose, despite his wounds, moved forward with a thermite grenade. He pulled the pin and dropped it into the tunnel entrance. The grenade ignited with a white-hot fury, burning at over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat was immediate and intense, forcing them back. The thermite would melt the tunnel supports, collapse the entrance, seal it, hopefully. Jake leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his rifle. The adrenaline was leaving his system in waves, replaced by something cold and hollow. He'd killed a man, shot him in the chest, watched him fall, stepped over his corpse. The insurgent's face was burned into his retinas, young, maybe early 20s, a thin beard, eyes wide with surprise that he was dying. Ghost slumped against the opposite wall, his face gray with pain. He'd saved Jake's life, probably shredded his ribs further in the process, and now he could barely stand. "You good?" Jake asked, his voice rough. Ghost nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They weren't good. None of them were good. But they were alive. And in Fallujah, that was the only metric that mattered. Viking appeared in the doorway, surveying the carnage. "We need to keep moving. End of this hallway. Clear the rest of the ground floor. Establish a defensive perimeter before they regroup." They pushed forward, stepping over bodies, moving through the blood and the smoke and the impossible heat from the thermite still burning in the tunnel. The hallway ended in a kitchen, and that's when Jake's nose told him they'd found something worse than enemy fighters. The smell hit him first. Decomposition. Thick and sweet, and absolutely unmistakable. Then his eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through a barred window, and he saw them. 3 bodies slumped in the corner. An old man, a woman, and a child, couldn't have been more than 8 years old, executed, hands bound with wire, single bullet holes in the back of their heads. They'd been dead for days, the bodies swelling in the heat, skin turning colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Footloose saw them and vomited, just turned and puked against the wall, his whole body convulsing. The sound of his retching echoed in the kitchen. Jake wanted to vomit too, wanted to scream, wanted to unsee what he was seeing, but his body wouldn't cooperate. He just stood there staring while his brain tried to process the incomprehensible. They'd killed civilians. The insurgents had executed an entire family, probably the people who own this house, and left them here as... what? A warning? Bait? A message? Doc moved forward, his medic's instinct overriding his revulsion. He checked the bodies anyway, following protocol even though it was obvious. They've been dead 3, maybe 4 days, nothing we can do. Viking's jaw clenched so tight Jake could hear his teeth grinding. Fucking animals. From above, through the ceiling, came the sound of footsteps. Deliberate. Slow. The insurgents were moving across the 2nd floor, tracking the Marines' position, listening to their movement. And then the voice called down again, amused now. "You found the family?" The man was a collaborator. "He worked with you Americans. This is justice. And soon, you will join them." Laughter echoed from above. Multiple voices, multiple fighters. More than Jake had thought. Maybe 5, maybe 10. No way to know until they revealed themselves. The ceiling erupted with gunfire. The insurgents weren't aiming, just shooting through the floor, trying to hit the Marines below by probability and volume. Rounds punched through the plaster and concrete, sending debris raining down. One round hit the floor, centimeters from Jake's boot, sparking off the concrete. "Back! Get back to the front room!" Viking roared. They retreated in a fighting withdrawal. Preacher laying suppressing fire upward with his saw while the others moved, then Jake and Ghost covering while Preacher displaced. Military precision born from countless hours of drill, their bodies moving through the patterns even while their minds screamed at the chaos. They collapsed back into the front room, their tiny sanctuary in the middle of a concrete nightmare. Doc immediately set up a hasty aid station in the corner, laying out his medical supplies. 2 tourniquets left, morphine, some bandages, hemostatic gauze. Not enough. Not nearly enough for 6 hours. Ghost was fading, his breathing shallow and rapid. Shock setting in from the pain and the adrenaline crash. Doc laid him down gently, checked his vitals, started an IV. Preacher set up his saw facing the hallway, the weapon on a makeshift bipod made from a chunk of rubble. Ready to turn the hallway into a kill zone if anyone came through, Footloose sat against the wall, both shoulders bandaged now, his face pale and sweaty. He'd stopped humming. That scared Jake more than the bullets had. Viking got on the radio again. "Actual, Reaper 6, sit rep, ground floor partially secured, 3 EKIA, 1 tunnel entrance sealed, but we've got enemy forces on 2nd floor, unknown number, 1 urgent casualty, 2 walking wounded. Request immediate CASEVAC and armor support." The response came through crackling with static. "Reaper 6, copy your sit rep. Enemy activity intensifying citywide. QRF still pinned down. Armor support delayed. New ETA, 4 hours. Advise conserve ammunition and hold your position. Air support is unavailable. You are danger close to civilian structures. Out." 4 hours. Not 6 anymore. 4. It should have felt like good news. It didn't. Jake checked his ammunition again. 2 full magazines, 1 half empty, 90 rounds maybe, 4 hours. He did the math this time. If they got into sustained contact every 15 minutes, if he had to fire even a single magazine per contact, he'd run dry long before the tanks arrived. He was going to die here. The thought crystallized in his mind with perfect clarity. He was going to die in this house, in this room, in this city that hated him. His mom would get a folded flag and a letter full of carefully worded regrets. His little sister would cry. His dad would drink and pretend he wasn't crying too. And for what? A house in a city in a country that didn't want them here. For democracy that looked a lot like chaos. For freedom that smelled like corpses and tasted like dust. A sound from outside pulled him from the spiral. Vehicle engines, diesel, heavy. Viking's face lit up with hope. That's armor. They're early. The squad scrambled to the barred window. Jake pressed his face against the bars, peering through the steel shutter's gaps. It wasn't American armor. It was a civilian truck, a battered Toyota with its bed modified to mount a heavy machine gun, a DShK, Soviet-made 12.7mm by 108mm, the kind of weapon that could punch through engine blocks and turn human bodies into pink mist. The truck was parking directly across from their window, maybe 20 meters away. 4 insurgents were setting up the DShK, traversing it, aiming it directly at the house, directly at them. "Oh fuck," Ghost whispered from his position on the floor. "Oh fuck, that's a fucking..." The DShK opened fire. The DShK sounded like the end of the world. Not the sharp crack of AK fire or the staccato burst of M4s. This was deeper, slower, methodical. Thunk, 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 thunk. Each round a sledgehammer blow that shook the entire structure. The 12.7mm bullets weren't just penetrating the walls, they were destroying them. The window bars snapped like toothpicks. The steel shutter buckled, then tore away completely. Concrete exploded inward in fist-sized chunks that turned into shrapnel, filling the air with deadly fragments. The wall itself seemed to scream as the heavy machine gun systematically dismantled it. Jake hit the floor on instinct, pressing himself flat against the concrete as rounds passed overhead. The sound was apocalyptic, each bullet creating its own sonic boom, the air itself tearing apart. He could feel the shockwaves in his chest cavity, his organs vibrating with each impact. One round punched through the wall behind where Jake's head had been a second ago. He watched it exit, leaving a hole the size of a fist, daylight streaming through. If he'd still been standing, his head would have come apart, like a watermelon hit with a baseball bat. Preacher was screaming, not words, just a raw sound of pain and shock. His saw had taken a direct hit. The weapon had literally exploded, the receiver shattered by a 12.7mm round. His left hand was mangled, fingers hanging at wrong angles, blood spurting in arterial pulses. "Fall back! Fall back to the back room!" Viking roared, his voice barely audible over the DShK's continuous thunder. Doc grabbed Preacher under the arms, dragging him backward even as the kid screamed. Ghost tried to stand, couldn't with his broken ribs, started crawling. Footloose stumbled to his feet, grabbed Ghost's drag handle, pulled him along. Jake provided covering fire, not at the DShK, that would be suicide, but at the murder holes in the walls where insurgents might try to capitalize on the chaos. They scrambled through the hallway, boots slipping in the blood still slick on the floor, past the bodies they'd left there, the smell of death and thermite and fear all mixing together. The DShK kept firing, each round punching through walls like they were cardboard, tracking their movement through the house. The back room was tiny, 3 meters by 3 meters maybe. A mattress on the floor, some blankets, old furniture pushed against the walls. And crucially, thick walls on 3 sides. It had probably been a bedroom once. Now it was their Alamo. They collapsed inside and Vikings slammed the door shut. Not that it would stop a 12.7mm round, but it created a psychological barrier, a feeling of protection even if it was illusory. Doc went to work immediately. Preacher was in shock, his eyes unfocused, his breathing rapid and shallow. Blood was everywhere, on Doc's hands, on the floor, on the walls where Preacher had been dragged. Too much blood. "Hold him," Doc ordered. Jake and Footloose pinned Preacher to the mattress. The kid was thrashing, consciousness fading in and out, his body going into full panic mode. His left hand was a ruin, 2 fingers completely severed, one hanging by a thread of tendon and skin, the others bent at angles that made Jake's stomach turn. Doc pulled out trauma shears and made a decision. I have to take the fingers. The hanging one won't survive, and the others are too damaged. If I don't amputate now, infection will kill him before we get out of here. Do it, Viking said. There was no other choice. Doc positioned the shears around the dangling finger. On 3, 1, he cut on 1. Not 3. Always cut on 1 because people tense up waiting for 3. The tendon parted with a wet sound that Jake would hear in his nightmares forever. Preacher's scream was animal, inhuman, the kind of sound that shouldn't come from a human throat. He convulsed so hard that Jake and Footloose barely held him down. Doc worked fast. 2 more cuts, the mangled fingers that couldn't be saved. Then he pulled out a lighter, flicked it to life, and cauterized the wounds. The smell of burning flesh filled the tiny room, sweet and horrible and utterly nauseating. Preacher's screams cut off abruptly as he passed out, his body finally giving up, granting him the mercy of unconsciousness. Jake's hands were covered in Preacher's blood. He stared at them, disconnected from reality. This was real. This was happening. A 19-year-old kid from Alabama who'd been humming gospel songs this morning was now missing 3 fingers, mutilated in a back room in Fallujah, while a heavy machine gun tried to kill them all. The DShK was still firing, but the sound was different now, more distant. It had shifted position, probably repositioning to hit a different angle of the house. Through the walls, Jake could hear the insurgents upstairs laughing, shouting to each other in Arabic, coordinating. They were surrounded. Ground floor, second floor, and now a crew-served weapon outside. No way out except through enemies who had them completely encircled. Viking's radio crackled. Reaper 6, we're tracking heavy weapons fire at your position. What's your status? Viking keyed the mic, his voice tight with controlled rage. Actual, we are taking fire from a DShK heavy machine gun, approximately 20 meters from our position. We have fallen back to interior room. 1 urgent surgical, 2 walking wounded. We need KS, we need armor, we need it now. How copy? Static. Then, Reaper 6, negative on CAS. You are too close to civilian structures, too close to friendly forces. Risk of collateral damage is too high. Armor support is still... I don't give a fuck about collateral damage, Viking screamed into the radio. We are going to die here. Do you understand? We need... He stopped, took a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was dead calm, which was somehow more terrifying than the screaming. Actual, I am declaring Broken Arrow. We are in imminent danger of being overrun. Requesting emergency close air support. Danger close. Authorized to fire on our position if necessary. We are combat ineffective and will be KIA within the hour without immediate support. Reaper 6, out. Broken Arrow. The last resort call. The signal that a unit was about to be destroyed and needed everything. Artillery, air support, everything the military could throw at the problem. Damn the risks. The radio crackled. A different voice now. An officer higher up the chain. Reaper 6, Broken Arrow is acknowledged. Be advised, we have no available KS assets. Repeat, negative on air support. F-16s are engaged in strike missions north of your position. Apaches are refueling. We have no assets available for immediate tasking. Armor support, ETA is now 3 hours. You need to hold your position and... Viking threw the radio against the wall. It shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. In the sudden silence, broken only by Preacher's labored breathing and the distant DShK, nobody spoke. They were alone. No air support, no armor, no rescue coming for 3 hours. Just 6 Marines, 1 unconscious and mutilated, 1 with broken ribs, 2 with shrapnel wounds, and 2 running on fumes and ammunition they didn't have. Ghost spoke from where he was propped against the wall, his voice weak but clear. Viking, We're not making it 3 hours, you know that. Viking's face was stone. We'll make it. How? Footloose asked, his voice cracking. That DShK will tear this room apart, and we can't shoot back. We're sitting ducks. Then we stop being ducks, Viking said. He pulled out his remaining ammunition and counted 4 magazines. He looked at each of them. Ammo check now. Jake counted. 2 mags plus the half-empty one in his rifle. 70 rounds, maybe. Ghost, 2 mags, 60 rounds. Footloose, 3 mags, 90 rounds. Doc, 4 mags, but he was also carrying medical supplies, 120 rounds. Preacher, his saw was destroyed, but he had his sidearm. A Beretta M9 with 2 magazines, 30 rounds of 9mm. Total, maybe 400 rounds of rifle ammunition, plus 30 of pistol. Against an unknown number of insurgents with prepared positions, a heavy machine gun, and all the time in the world. We're fucked, Footloose whispered. Shut up, Viking said, but there was no heat in it. He was thinking, his eyes distant. Then he focused, and when he spoke, his voice carried absolute conviction. Listen up. We can't hold this room. That DShK will kill us eventually. We can't go out the way we came. It's sealed. We can't go through the exterior walls. They're too thick. So there's only one option. He pointed at the ceiling. We take the 2nd floor. The silence that followed was deafening. That's insane, Ghost said. We don't know how many of them are up there. We don't know the layout. We're wounded. Which is exactly why they won't expect it, Viking interrupted. They think we're trapped down here waiting to die. They're sitting up there, comfortable, taking pot shots at us. They're not expecting us to come for them. Jake's mind raced through the tactical nightmare. A 2-man assault up a narrow staircase into an unknown number of enemies with superior positions. It was suicide. It was tactically insane. It violated every doctrine they'd been taught. It was also their only chance. 2-man team, Viking continued, Jake and me. We push up, clear the 2nd floor in a dynamic entry. Ghost holds this room with the wounded. If we don't come back, you know what to do. He pulled a fragmentation grenade from his vest and handed it to Ghost. The implication was clear. If the insurgents breached the room and they were about to be captured, Ghost would pull the pin and take everyone, friend and foe, to hell together. Better dead than captured, better martyred than on a beheading video. Ghost took the grenade with his good hand, nodded. Jake should have been terrified, should have been pissing himself at the thought of running up those stairs into concentrated enemy fire. But somewhere in the last hour, fear had burned away and left something else, a cold, crystalline clarity. He was already dead. They were all already dead. This was just choosing how to die, cowering in a back room or taking the fight to the enemy. I'm in, Jake said. Viking's eyes met his, and something passed between them, an understanding, a mutual acceptance of their probable death. Viking pulled Preacher's KA-bar knife from the unconscious Marine's vest and handed it to Jake. You run dry, you go to the knife. You go to hands and teeth if you have to, but you keep moving forward. Understood? Understood. They checked their weapons. Jake had maybe 70 rounds. Viking had 120 against an unknown enemy force in their own prepared positions. The math was brutal and simple. They would probably run out of ammunition before they ran out of enemies. Doc grabbed Jake's arm as he moved toward the door. Reaper, you come back, you hear me? You fucking come back. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. They moved to the doorway. Behind them, Ghost positioned himself with a sightline on the door, the grenade within easy reach. Footloose held his rifle one-handed, his other shoulder too damaged to support the weapon properly. Doc knelt beside Preacher, monitoring his vitals, ready to become a fighter if the worst happened. Viking and Jake stepped into the hallway. The bodies were still there, starting to stiffen with rigor mortis. The blood was starting to dry, turning from bright red to rust brown. The smell was overwhelming. Death and thermite and gunpowder and human waste. Jake's boots stuck slightly to the congealed blood as he moved. They reached the base of the stairs, narrow, maybe a meter wide. 15 steps up to a landing, then a turn, then presumably more steps to the second floor. A fatal funnel, worse than the entrance had been. One man could hold those stairs against a platoon if he knew what he was doing. Viking pulled his last flashbang from his vest. He looked at Jake, mouthed, "On 3. This time it really would be 3. Viking held up one finger. Jake's heart hammered so hard he could see his vision pulse with each beat. His hands were steady on his rifle despite the adrenaline. All the fear had compressed into a single point of white-hot focus. 2 fingers. He could hear them upstairs. Footsteps. Voices. They knew the Marines were down here, but they didn't know what was coming. Didn't know that 2 men with nothing left to lose were about to bring the fight to them. 3 fingers. Viking pulled the pin and tossed the flashbang up the stairs in one smooth motion. It bounced, once, twice. The detonation was catastrophic in the enclosed stairwell. Even with eyes closed and facing away, even with his hands over his ears, Jake felt the concussive blast and saw the white light through his eyelids. The sound was a physical force that slammed into him. Then they were moving. Viking went first, taking the stairs 3 at a time, rifle up and firing before he even reached the landing. Jake was right behind him. His world narrowed to Viking's back and the green glow of his night vision and the muzzle flash of his own rifle as he fired up into the smoke and chaos. Someone screamed in Arabic. Viking's rifle barked in controlled bursts. 2 rounds shift, 2 rounds shift. Jake hit the landing and saw an insurgent recovering from the flashbang, AK coming up. He fired, double tap, center mass. The man went down, turned the corner, more stairs. A second insurgent at the top, firing blind, rounds sparking off the walls. Viking took him with a headshot, the insurgent's skull coming apart, body tumbling backward. They reached the second floor landing in a rush of violence and momentum. A hallway stretched before them, 3 doors visible. 2 insurgents in the hallway, one recovering from the flashbang, the other raising an RPK light machine gun. Jake fired first, dumped half his magazine into the one with the RPK. The insurgent went down in a spray of blood. Viking took the other one with precision, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. But there were more. A door burst open on the right. An insurgent lunged out, rifle raised. Viking put him down. Another door on the left. Jake cleared it with a burst of fire, then pushed through in a tactical entry. Empty room, old furniture, murder holes in the walls where the insurgents had been firing down at them. The floor was littered with spent brass casings, hundreds of them from the extended firefight. The air smelled like a rifle range. Back into the hallway. Viking was stacking on another door. Jake joined him. They'd been on the second floor for maybe 15 seconds and had already killed 4 insurgents. But how many more? 5? 10? No way to know. Viking kicked the door. It flew open. The room beyond was occupied. 2 insurgents caught in the act of reloading their weapons. Both looked up in shock. Neither had time to react before Viking and Jake opened fire. The room became a slaughterhouse, both insurgents shredded by intersecting fields of fire. But Jake's rifle locked back on an empty magazine. He was dry. He dropped the empty mag, reached for a fresh one, his last one, and in that half second of vulnerability, an insurgent burst from a closet Jake hadn't cleared. The insurgent had an AK-47 in one hand and a knife in the other. Young, maybe 17, scraggly beard, eyes wild with fear and fanaticism. He lunged at Jake, the knife flashing. Jake sidestepped, the blade missing by centimeters. He brought his rifle up to shoot, but the kid knocked it aside. They grappled, crashed into the wall. The insurgent was screaming in Arabic, spittle flying from his mouth. Jake could smell him, sweat and fear and the same cordite that covered everything. Jake dropped the rifle, grabbed the insurgent's knife hand with both of his own, twisted. The knife clattered away. The insurgent headbutted him, catching Jake on the already broken nose. Pain exploded across Jake's face, white hot and blinding. Blood poured down his throat, choking him. Jake brought his knee up into the insurgent's groin. The kid grunted, but didn't let go. They were face to face now, so close Jake could see the pores on his skin, the fear in his eyes. The youth that war had twisted into something violent and desperate. Jake's hand found the KA bar on his chest rig, pulled it free, drove it up under the rib cage. The insurgent's eyes went wide. Jake felt the blade punch through skin and muscle and grate against bone, felt the heat of the kid's blood pouring over his hand, felt the body shudder and go slack. Jake pulled the knife out and the insurgent collapsed, dead before he hit the floor. Jake stood there, knife in hand, blood dripping from the blade and his own face staring at the body. I'd killed men before, today in the hallway, at distance, with a rifle. But this was different. This was intimate. He'd felt the life leave this kid's body, felt the exact moment the soul evacuated and left just meat behind. He was going to be sick. He was going to... "Reaper, clear that room." Viking's voice cut through the shock. Jake moved on autopilot, cleared the closet, empty. Cleared under the bed, empty. Cleared the bathroom connected to the room, empty. The room was clear. The entire second floor was clear. Jake emerged into the hallway to find Viking checking the other rooms, moving with mechanical efficiency. 6 insurgents total, all dead. The second floor belonged to the Marines now, but Jake didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow, empty, like someone had reached inside him and scooped out everything human and left just the soldier behind. Viking was on the stairs, calling down, "Second floor secure. Ghost, status?" Ghost's voice came back weak but alive. "DShK pulled back. Your noise spooked them. We're still here." Viking grinned, a feral, predatory expression that had nothing to do with humor. "We fucking did it, Reaper. We own this floor." Jake looked at his hands, covered in blood that wasn't his own. The KA bar still dripping. His broken nose streaming blood down his chin. His ears ringing from gunfire in enclosed spaces. His body running on adrenaline and spite and nothing else. "We did it," he repeated mechanically. But he couldn't feel it. Couldn't feel anything except the ghost of the insurgent's body going limp against him, the memory of the knife punching through flesh, the knowledge that he'd killed a kid, not a soldier, a kid, with his own hands in a dirty room in a forgotten city. Viking was already moving, searching the rooms for intelligence. He pulled a camcorder from one room, tapes and photos from another, propaganda materials. The insurgents had been filming their attacks, editing them, preparing to upload them to the internet for the world to see. In another room, Viking found something else. He called Jake over, his voice flat. The room was small, dark, chains bolted to the walls, bloodstains on the floor, old ones deep brown and black, soaked into the concrete. The smell was overwhelming, even through the other odors, human waste, fear, suffering. "They held hostages here," Viking said quietly. "Probably Americans, maybe Iraqi collaborators. Probably dead now." Jake stared at the chains. Someone had been held here, in this room, waiting to die, tortured maybe, certainly terrified. And the insurgents had done it in this house, in these rooms, while planning ambushes and filming propaganda and preparing to kill more Americans. "This is why we fight," Viking said, putting a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Remember that. They're not freedom fighters, they're evil, and we're necessary." Jake wanted to feel righteous, wanted to feel like the kid he'd killed deserved it, but all he felt was tired. Tired and empty and so far from home that home didn't even feel real anymore. A sound from outside, distant but growing closer. Engines. Viking moved to a window and looked out. His face transformed, the hardness cracking into something like relief. "Tanks," he breathed. "That's Abrams. They're early." Jake joined him at the window. Through the bars he could see them, M1A1 Abrams main battle tanks rolling down the street, their 120mm cannons traversing, searching for targets. The DShK truck tried to flee, the insurgents scrambling to dismount the heavy machine gun. The lead tank's main gun fired. The sound was apocalyptic, a cracked boom that shook the entire building. The DShK truck simply disintegrated, turned into a fireball and flying metal fragments. The insurgents manning it ceased to exist as individual entities and became part of the explosion. The house shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. But Jake didn't care. The cavalry was here. They'd survived. Viking was already moving, pulling a smoke grenade, heading to the stairs. "Ghost, we're marking our position. Armor is here." They gathered in what remained of the front room, all 6 of them, battered and bloody but alive. Viking popped the smoke grenade and tossed it into the kitchen, letting the colored smoke billow out through the shattered windows. The tanks repositioned. One moved directly to the house. There was a brief radio exchange that Jake couldn't hear. Then the wall exploded. A controlled breaching charge blew a hole in the exterior wall, and suddenly there was light. Real sunlight, not the dim, filtered light from barred windows, but actual, honest-to-God sunlight flooding in. American soldiers poured through the breach. Marines, Army, Jake couldn't tell and didn't care. They were friendly faces, American voices, the cavalry that had finally arrived. Someone grabbed Jake. "You okay, Marine?" Jake tried to answer. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. His legs gave out. Someone caught him, lowered him to the ground. Medics appeared, checking him over, shining lights in his eyes, asking questions he couldn't process. The world was getting dim around the edges, shock probably. Adrenaline crash, blood loss, exhaustion, all of it hitting at once now that the immediate threat was gone. He heard Viking's voice, distant. "6 of us came in. 6 of us are coming out. Somebody get these Marines to an aid station." Jake felt himself being lifted onto a stretcher. The sky above was blue. When had that happened? The ceiling was gone, replaced by sky. Or maybe they'd carried him outside. He couldn't tell anymore. His last conscious thought before the world went black. We survived. But something inside him knew that survival wasn't the same as making it out whole. Something inside him had stayed in that house, and he would never get it back. The flashbang detonated with the force of a small sun. Even with his eyes clamped shut, even facing away, even with his hands pressed over his ears, Jake saw white through his eyelids and felt the concussive blast punch him in the chest like a fist. The sound was beyond hearing. It was a physical sensation, a pressure wave that made his brain slosh in his skull. His vision came back in stages. First just white, then shapes, then definition. The world resolved into a green-tinted nightmare through his night vision, smoke and dust hanging in the air like a fog. The stairwell, a narrow throat leading up into hell. He fired as he moved, not aiming at anything specific, just putting rounds uprange, filling the air with lead to suppress anyone trying to shoot back. His rifle bucked in his hands, spent casings ejecting in a brass stream, the sound muffled and distant through his damaged hearing. Viking was ahead of him. A massive shape in the smoke, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. 2 rounds, pause, shift, 2 more rounds. Economy of motion, economy of ammunition. Even in the chaos, even in the rush, Viking fought with the precision of a man who'd done this too many times to count. Jake's boot hit something soft on the stairs. A body. The first insurgent, already dead from Viking's opening burst. Jake didn't look down, didn't process it as human, just an obstacle to step over. His mind had shifted into a different mode, the combat mode where people weren't people anymore, just targets and non-targets, threats and non-threats. They hit the landing, and the second insurgent was there, AK coming up, mouth open in a scream Jake couldn't hear. Viking put 2 rounds through his chest and 1 through his face as the body fell. The insurgent's head snapped back, a spray of dark matter painting the wall behind him. Turned the corner. More stairs. The hallway at the top. 2 insurgents in the hallway itself. caught in the open. One had an RPK light machine gun. The other had an AK with a drum magazine. Both were recovering from the flashbang, eyes squinted, movement sluggish. Jake and Viking fired simultaneously. The intersecting fire caught both insurgents in a crossfire they couldn't escape. The one with the RPK went down first, his chest opening up in a spray of red. The one with the AK managed to fire a burst. Wild, uncontrolled, rounds sparking off the ceiling before Jake's bullets found him. The hallway was maybe 5 meters long. 3 doors, 2 on the left, 1 on the right. Viking stacked on the first door right. Jake covered the hallway, scanning for movement, for threats, for anything that wanted to kill them. Viking kicked the door. It flew open on cheap hinges. He flooded the room with his weapon light, and his rifle muzzle followed the light, tracking, searching. Clear. They moved to the next door. Left side this time. The door was closed, but not locked. Viking tested the handle, then yanked it open and stepped through in one fluid motion. Jake followed half a second behind, his rifle seeking targets. 2 insurgents inside. Both were reloading their weapons, an AK and an old SKS carbine. Both looked up in shock as the door burst open. Both made the fatal mistake of trying to finish loading their weapons instead of running or surrendering. The room became a killing box. Jake fired on the left, Viking on the right. The noise was catastrophic in the enclosed space. Jake's muzzle flash illuminated the room in strobe light bursts. Dirty mattress on the floor, propaganda posters on the walls, spent brass casings everywhere, and then blood splashing across all of it as the 2 insurgents came apart under the sustained fire. Jake's rifle clicked dry, the bolt locked back, empty. He dropped the magazine, his hands moving through the reload drill automatically. Reach to the mag pouch, pull a fresh magazine, guide it to the magazine well, seat it with a palm strike, hit the bolt release. The rifle was back in battery in under 3 seconds. But those 3 seconds felt like an eternity. 3 seconds of vulnerability, of being unable to shoot back, of being a target instead of a shooter. His heart hammered against his ribs. Sweat stung his eyes behind his ballistic glasses, movement in his peripheral vision. A closet door. Jake hadn't checked the closet. Fundamental error. Fatal error. An insurgent burst out, AK-47 in one hand, a curved knife in the other. Young, couldn't have been more than 17. Scraggly beard, eyes wide with fear and rage and something else. Fanaticism, maybe, or just youth and stupidity and the terrible knowledge that he was probably about to die. Jake tried to bring his rifle up, but the insurgent was too close inside his weapon's effective range. The kid knocked the barrel aside and lunged with the knife. Jake sidestepped, the blade whistling past his face close enough that he felt the air displacement. The insurgent crashed into him and they both went down, slamming into the wall hard enough to knock the air from Jake's lungs. The kid was on top of him, knife raised. Jake caught the wrist with both hands, stopping the downward strike inches from his face. The insurgent was stronger than he looked, wiry strength, all desperate energy and adrenaline. The knife shook in the air between them, getting closer, Jake's arms trembling with the effort of holding it back. The insurgent was screaming, high-pitched, continuous, Arabic words Jake didn't understand but whose meaning was clear enough. Kill the American. Gut him. Bleed him dry. Send him home in pieces. Jake headbutted him. His already broken nose exploded in fresh agony, white-hot pain that made his vision blur. But the insurgent's nose broke too, blood gushing down both their faces, and his grip on the knife loosened just slightly. Jake twisted, using the kid's momentum against him, rolling them both. Now Jake was on top, still gripping the knife hand, slamming it against the floor once, twice, 3 times, until the knife skittered away across the concrete. But the insurgent wasn't done. He clawed at Jake's face, fingers going for his eyes. Jake jerked his head back, felt fingernails scrape across his cheek, drawing blood. The kid brought a knee up, trying for Jake's groin. Missed, hit his thigh instead, still painful enough to make Jake gasp. They were face to face now, so close Jake could smell him. Tea and tobacco and sweat, Could see the individual pores on his skin, could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear that was probably in Jake's own eyes. Two scared kids from opposite sides of the world, trying to kill each other in a dirty room in a city neither of them had heard of 2 years ago. Jake's hand found the KA bar on his chest rig, fingers closed around the handle, pulled it free from its sheath, with a whisper of steel on kydex. The insurgent saw the knife, his eyes went wide. He tried to buck Jake off, thrashing, screaming, fighting with the desperate strength of someone who knows death is coming. Jake drove the blade up under the rib cage, angling for the heart. Resistance at first, the skin, then muscle, then the grating sensation of steel scraping against bone, then the blade punched through and slid home. The insurgent's scream cut off. His body went rigid, every muscle locked tight. His mouth opened and closed, wordless, trying to form sounds that wouldn't come. Blood bubbled up from his lips, lung shot, or maybe the blade had nicked the heart after all. Jake felt it, felt the exact moment the life left the body beneath him, felt the muscles relax, the tension drain away, the light go out of those terrified eyes. The insurgent's last breath was a wet rattle, blood and air mixing in damaged lungs. Jake pulled the knife out. Blood poured from the wound, dark, arterial blood that pooled on the floor beneath them. The body twitched once, twice, then went still. Jake rolled off him, his own breath coming in ragged gasps. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. He'd killed men before, this morning in the hallway, with his rifle from a distance where they were just targets, just shapes to put rounds into. But this was different. This was intimate in a way that made Jake's skin crawl. He'd felt the kid's breath on his face, felt his body heat, felt the exact moment his heart stopped beating. He'd looked into his eyes and seen the fear and the youth and the humanity, and he'd killed him anyway because that's what you did when someone was trying to kill you. But knowing it was necessary didn't make it feel any better. "Reaper!" Viking's voice cut through the fog. Jake looked up. Viking was in the doorway, rifle up, scanning the room for threats. "You good?" Viking asked, his eyes flicking from Jake to the body and back. Jake nodded, couldn't speak, didn't trust his voice. "Clear the room. Now." Jake moved on autopilot, checked the closet the insurgent had come from, empty except for some blankets and ammunition. Checked under the bed, nothing. Checked the bathroom connected to the bedroom. Sink, toilet, no insurgents hiding in the shower stall. The room was clear. He was covered in blood. His blood, the insurgent's blood. He couldn't tell anymore. It was all the same temperature now, all the same slick wetness, coating his hands and face and soaking into his uniform. Viking was already moving to the next room, methodical and efficient. They cleared it together. Empty, just another bedroom with murder holes cut into the walls, spent brass casings littering the floor like confetti. This was where the insurgents had been, firing down at them for the past hour, safe in their elevated positions, picking their shots. The third room was different. Viking kicked the door and they both flooded in, weapons up, scanning for no insurgents, but it wasn't empty. The room was a studio, a camcorder on a tripod, pointed at a chair, draped with a black cloth, propaganda posters on the walls, jihadist imagery, anti-American slogans in Arabic, a laptop computer on a desk, stacks of tapes labeled in Arabic script, and photos, dozens of photos pinned to the walls. Dead Americans. Jake's stomach turned. The photos showed ambush sites, destroyed Humvees, bodies in ACU uniforms sprawled in the street, pools of blood, trophies. The insurgents had been documenting their kills, photographing them, probably uploading them to jihadi websites for propaganda. Viking's jaw clenched so tight Jake could hear his teeth grinding. He grabbed the camcorder, yanked the tape out, pocketed it. Intel. Evidence. Proof of what was happening in this city, in case anyone back home needed reminding. "Fucking animals," Viking muttered. But Jake couldn't look away from one photo in particular. A Marine, maybe 20 years old, lying face down in the street with multiple gunshot wounds. The photographer had zoomed in on the name tape on his uniform. Hernandez. That Marine had a name, had a family, had people who loved him and would get a folded flag and a letter full of official condolences. In another room, a small one, barely larger than a closet, Viking found something worse. Chains bolted to the concrete walls, bloodstains on the floor, old, oxidized to dark brown and black, soaked deep into the porous concrete. The smell was overwhelming even through all the other odors. Human waste, fear, suffering concentrated in this tiny space. Scratch marks on the walls, fingernail scratches. Someone had been held here, chained up, probably for days. Tortured, maybe. Certainly terrified. The scratches looked desperate, frantic. The marks of someone who'd tried to claw their way to freedom and failed. "Hostage room," Viking said, his voice flat and emotionless, in that way that meant he was feeling too much to show any of it. They held people here. Americans, probably. Iraqi collaborators. Anyone they wanted to break before they killed them. Jake stared at the chains, imagined hands bound in them, imagined waiting in the dark, knowing death was coming, knowing it would probably be slow and painful and filmed for propaganda. His hands clenched into fists. "This is why," Viking said quietly, more to himself than to Jake. "This is why we're here. This is why we fight. They're not freedom fighters. They're not insurgents. They're fucking evil, and we're necessary." He turned to Jake, put a hand on his shoulder. "That kid you killed, he was part of this? He helped do this? You did the right thing. Remember that." Jake wanted to feel righteous, wanted the words to make the hollow feeling in his chest go away, but they didn't. The kid he'd killed was evil, yes. Was part of something monstrous, yes. But he'd also been 17 years old and terrified and probably brainwashed by older men who'd fed him lies about paradise and martyrdom. Jake had felt him die. That didn't go away just because the cause was righteous. From outside, a sound that made both of them snap to the window. Engines, heavy diesel engines, the deep rumble of tracked vehicles. Viking moved to the barred window and looked out through a gap in the shutter. His whole body went rigid. Then he started laughing. Not humor, but relief so profound it came out as laughter. "Tanks," he said. "That's Abrams. Armor's here." Jake joined him at the window. Through the bent metal of the shutter, he could see them rolling up the street. M101 Abrams main battle tanks, massive and brutal and beautiful. 68 tons of American steel with a 120mm smoothbore cannon and enough armor to shrug off anything short of a direct RPG hit. The DShK truck was trying to reposition, the insurgent crew frantically trying to traverse their heavy machine gun to engage the tanks. Futile, pointless, like fighting a tiger with a stick. The lead tank's turret traversed with hydraulic precision. The main gun locked onto the truck. Viking was already moving, pulling a smoke grenade from his vest. "Ghost, armor's here. We're marking our position." He pulled the pin and tossed the grenade into the kitchen, where it hissed and billowed colored smoke. Orange, the color they'd coordinated for friendly position marking. Through the window, Jake watched the tank fire. The sound was beyond description. Not just loud, but physically overwhelming. A crack boom that shook the entire building, rattled windows in their frames, made dust rain from the ceiling. The muzzle blast was a sphere of fire and pressure that distorted the air itself. The DShK truck didn't explode so much as it ceased to exist as a coherent object. One moment it was there, insurgents scrambling around it. The next moment it was a fireball expanding outward, metal fragments tumbling through the air, and when the smoke cleared, there was just a crater where the truck had been. The insurgents were gone, vaporized, turned into component atoms by a 120mm heat, round traveling at 1,600 meters per second. The house shook from the blast. Jake grabbed the window frame to steady himself. His ears were ringing again, would probably be ringing for days, maybe weeks, maybe forever. But it didn't matter. The armor was here. The siege was over. Viking was on the stairs, calling down. "Ghost! Status!" Ghost's voice came back, weak but alive. "Still here. Preacher's stable. We're all still breathing." "Roger that. Mark your position. We're breaching from outside." Jake could hear radio chatter now. Tankers coordinating with engineers, combat engineers setting breaching charges, the whole beautiful symphony of the American military machine grinding into motion to pull them out of this concrete tomb. They made their way downstairs carefully, weapons still ready. The insurgents on the second floor were all dead, but that didn't mean there weren't more hiding in the walls or in collapsed tunnels. The house was still dangerous, still a trap, but it was a trap they'd survived. The ground floor front room was a disaster. Concrete dust coating everything, blood on the walls and floor, the smell of cordite and death so thick it was almost visible. Ghost was propped against the wall, his face gray with pain but alert. Preacher was unconscious on the mattress, his bandaged hand a stark white against all the blood. Footloose sat nearby, both shoulders wrapped, his face pale but determined. Doc was checking vitals, counting respirations, doing the math on who would need immediate CASEVAC and who could wait. Outside, the sound of tracks on pavement, engines idling, commands being shouted, the glorious chaos of reinforcements. There was a shout from outside. "Marines in the building! Mark your position!" "Marked!" Viking roared back. "Orange smoke in the kitchen, 6 friendly personnel, 3 urgent casualties." A pause, then, "Breaching in 30 seconds. Get clear of the exterior walls." They huddled in the center of the room, as far from the walls as possible. Jake counted down in his head. 30 seconds, 29, 28. At 0, the world exploded for the final time. The breaching charge detonated with a focused blast that punched a hole through the reinforced concrete exterior wall like it was tissue paper. The shockwave rolled through the room, slamming into them with enough force to make Jake's teeth rattle. Dust and debris filled the air. And then, light. Real light. Actual sunlight, not the dim filtered light through barred windows, but honest to God, daylight, flooding through a hole big enough to drive a Humvee through. American soldiers poured through the breach. Marines in full battle rattle, weapons up, scanning for threats. An Army combat engineer team following to secure the breach. Medics with stretchers and trauma bags, and the most beautiful sight Jake had ever seen. Medical equipment that meant someone else could take care of the wounded now. A staff sergeant. Jake didn't recognize, grabbed his shoulder. "You okay, Marine?" Jake opened his mouth to answer. To say yes, he was fine, just tired, just ready to get out of this fucking house and never think about it again. But no words came out. His mouth moved, but his voice was gone. His legs suddenly felt like they were made of water. The room tilted sideways. The staff sergeant's face swam in and out of focus. "I got you," someone said. "I got you, Marine. You're safe now." Hands caught him as his legs gave out, lowered him to the ground gently. Medics appeared, checking his pupils with a penlight, checking for wounds he didn't remember getting, asking questions that sounded like they were coming from underwater. Jake tried to focus, tried to stay present, but the edges of his vision were going dark, narrowing to a tunnel, then to a pinpoint, then to nothing. His last conscious thought was Viking's voice, distant but clear. 6 went in, 6 are coming out. Get these Marines to an aid station. 6 went in, 6 came out. But Jake knew with absolute certainty, even as consciousness slipped away, that something had been left behind in that house. Some part of himself that he'd never get back. Some piece of his humanity that had leaked out through the cracks in his armor and soaked into the blood-stained concrete. They'd survived. But survival wasn't the same as making it out whole. The darkness claimed him, and Jake Morrison, 23 years old from Bakersfield, California, point man, Corporal, United States Marine Corps, disappeared into it gratefully. Jake woke to the sound of helicopter rotors, not the deep thump of a Chinook or the aggressive chop of an Apache, but the distinctive whop 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 of a UH-60 Blackhawk, a Medevac bird. The sound filtered through layers of consciousness like sunlight through water, pulling him up from the dark place he'd fallen into. He opened his eyes. White fabric overhead, the curved interior of a helicopter fuselage, medical equipment strapped to the walls, an IV bag swinging from a hook above him, the tube snaking down to his arm, and faces, a flight medic checking his vitals, Viking sitting across from him with a bandage wrapped around his chest, Ghost on another stretcher with his eyes closed. They were airborne. They were out. The hell house was behind them. Jake tried to sit up. The medic, a young specialist with kind eyes and blood on his gloves, pushed him back down gently. "Easy, Corporal, you're in shock. Just lie back. We've got you." "My guys," Jake managed to croak. His voice sounded like gravel, his throat raw from smoke and dust and screaming. "Where? Everyone's accounted for," the medic said. "All 6 of you are on this bird. 2 more severe casualties are going straight to surgical. You and the others are going to the field hospital for evaluation. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign. Jake had been in the house for... how long? He'd lost all sense of time. It felt like days, but had probably been hours. However long it was, safe had stopped being a concept that applied to him. Safe was for people in other places, other lives. Not for Marines trapped in concrete tombs with insurgents in the walls and heavy machine guns outside. But the rotors kept chopping and the medic kept checking his IV, and through the open door of the Blackhawk, Jake could see Fallujah shrinking below them. The city spread out like a diseased organism, smoke rising from 100 different fires, tracers arcing across neighborhoods, explosions blooming like deadly flowers. The Hell House was just one tiny square in a vast grid of urban warfare, unremarkable from the air, indistinguishable from 1,000 other death traps scattered across the city. They'd survived their particular hell. But the city was full of others, and somewhere down there, other Marines were fighting their own desperate battles. Viking caught his eye and nodded once. The gesture said everything. We made it. We're alive. We did our job. Jake nodded back, but the hollow feeling in his chest didn't go away. The flight was short, maybe 10 minutes. The Blackhawk banked, descended, and touched down on a dusty LZ outside a field hospital. The rotors never stopped spinning. Hot refuel in and out. The Medevac bird would be airborne again in minutes to pick up the next batch of wounded. Corpsmen swarmed the helicopter before the skids even settled. Jake's stretcher was pulled out, carried across the LZ at a run. The sun was bright, painfully bright after hours in the dim interior of the house. Jake squinted against it, his damaged eyes struggling to adjust. The field hospital was controlled chaos, tents set up in rows, generators humming, the organized frenzy of mass casualty response in full swing. Operation Phantom Fury was chewing through Marines and soldiers faster than the medical system could process them. Every tent was full. Every doctor and nurse was moving at a dead run. The air smelled like antiseptic and blood and diesel exhaust. Jake was carried into a triage tent and deposited on a cot. A doctor appeared. A Navy lieutenant commander with tired eyes and blood spattered on his scrubs. He ran through a rapid assessment. Pupils reactive, no obvious arterial bleeding. Blood pressure low but stable, obvious signs of shock and dehydration. Broken nose, lacerations to the face and neck, possible concussion, severe dehydration. Looks like you bit through your tongue, the doctor rattled off, more to himself than to Jake. Any pain in your abdomen? Chest? Any difficulty breathing? No, Jake managed. Good. You're triaged as delayed. We'll get you cleaned up, fluids, observation for a few hours. You got lucky, Marine. Lucky. Jake wanted to laugh. Lucky was not getting trapped in the house in the first place. Lucky was the doorway not collapsing. Lucky was the insurgent's knife missing instead of finding his throat. This wasn't luck. This was surviving by inches and seconds, and the grace of better training and equipment than the enemy had. But he didn't say any of that, just nodded. A corpsman appeared and led him to a cleaning station, a bucket of clean water and sterile wipes that looked like they came from heaven. Jake stripped off his bloody gloves and body armor, wincing as the vest pulled away from his sweat-soaked uniform. The armor had rubbed his shoulders raw, leaving angry red marks where the straps had dug in for hours. His uniform was stiff with dried blood, his own and others. The corpsman helped him wash the blood off his face and hands. The water in the bucket turned pink, then red. Jake watched it swirl, mesmerized by the color. How much of that was his blood? How much belonged to the insurgent he'd killed with the knife? How much had sprayed onto him from Ghost's shoulder wound or Preacher's mangled hand? No way to tell. It was all mixed together now, all the same. "This is going to sting," the corpsman warned, then started cleaning the gash on Jake's neck with antiseptic. It did sting, a sharp chemical burn that made Jake hiss through his teeth. But it was nothing compared to the other pains, nothing compared to the ache in his chest that had nothing to do with physical injury. Across the tent, he could see the others being treated. Ghost was on a gurney, a doctor examining his ribs, probably ordering x-rays. Preacher was still unconscious. That was concerning. Doc had said shock and blood loss, but unconscious for this long might mean something worse. Footloose was sitting up, both shoulders bandaged, talking to a nurse with animated hand gestures. Apparently getting shot twice hadn't shut him up. Doc was arguing with a doctor, insisting he was fine, trying to treat other wounded instead of being treated himself. Viking was getting his chest x-rayed, the bruised sternum from the AK round that had hit his plate. The Kevlar had saved his life, but the blunt force trauma had probably cracked bone. They were all alive, wounded, damaged, traumatized, but alive, against odds that should have been impossible. Jake finished cleaning up and was led to an observation area, a row of cots where the delayed category patients waited for further evaluation. He lay down on the cot, and the exhaustion hit him all at once. He'd been running on adrenaline for hours, and now that the immediate danger was gone, his body was demanding payment. But he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back in the house, the hallway, the knife going in, the insurgent's eyes going wide, the feel of blood on his hands. He kept his eyes open and stared at the tent ceiling, counting the support poles, trying to focus on anything except the memories playing on repeat in his head. A chaplain appeared, an army captain with a kind face and a cross pinned to his uniform. "Mind if I sit, son?" Jake shrugged. The chaplain sat on the edge of the cot. "I'm not going to ask if you're okay," the chaplain said quietly. "I can see you're not, but I'm here if you want to talk, or if you just want someone to sit with you. Your call." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I killed someone today, up close, with a knife." The chaplain nodded. "I know. I read your preliminary debrief. You were defending yourself." He was 17, maybe younger, just a kid who was trying to kill you. "Does that make it okay?" Jake asked, his voice cracking. "Does that make it right?" I felt him die. I felt his heart stop. I looked in his eyes and saw, I don't know what I saw. Fear, hate, maybe both. And I killed him anyway. The chaplain was quiet for a moment. "You did what you had to do to survive. That doesn't make it easy. That doesn't mean it won't haunt you. But it also doesn't make you a murderer. It makes you a soldier doing an impossible job in an impossible situation. I don't feel like a soldier. I feel like a..." Jake couldn't finish the sentence, didn't have words for what he felt like. "A human being who's been through trauma," the chaplain finished for him. "That's what you are. A human being who did what was necessary and is now dealing with the consequences. That's not weakness, Marine. That's your conscience working exactly how it should." Jake wanted to believe that, wanted to feel like his guilt was normal, healthy even, but it didn't change the fact that somewhere in Fallujah, that 17-year-old kid's body was cooling on a dirty floor, and Jake had put him there. The chaplain stayed for a few more minutes, offering quiet presence more than words. When he finally left, Jake felt marginally less alone. Marginally. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, visible through the gaps in the tent fabric. Jake dozed fitfully, never quite falling in real sleep, just skimming the surface of unconsciousness while his brain processed trauma in fragmented dreams. He woke fully to Viking standing over him. The staff sergeant looked like he'd aged a decade. His face was haggard, eyes sunken, the lines around his mouth deeper than they'd been this morning. His chest was wrapped in bandages under his uniform top. "How you feeling, Reaper?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Jake said honestly. Viking snorted. "That truck was a house full of Hajis and a DShK. Could have been worse." He pulled up a stool and sat, groaning slightly as his bruised sternum protested. "I talked to the docs. Ghost has 3 broken ribs and they're keeping him for observation. Worried about lung puncture. Preacher woke up, but he's in serious pain. They're transferring him and Ghost to the surgical hospital in Baghdad for proper treatment. Footloose is staying here overnight for observation. Doc finally let them check him over. He's got shrapnel in his back he didn't tell anyone about. Stubborn bastard." "And you?" "Bruised sternum, no fractures. They wanted to keep me. I told them to fuck off. I've got a platoon that needs me." Viking paused, then looked Jake in the eye. "You did good today, Reaper. Real good. When it counted, when it got close and personal, you didn't freeze. You did what needed doing." Jake didn't feel like he'd done good. He felt like he'd barely survived, but he nodded anyway. "They're putting us in for citations," Viking continued. "Bronze Star with Valor for you and me for the second floor assault. Navy Cross for Ghost for laying suppressing fire with broken ribs. The whole squad's getting Purple Hearts for wounds received. Command is calling it a textbook example of small unit tactics under impossible circumstances." "Textbook," Jake repeated hollowly. Viking's face hardened. "I know it doesn't feel like a victory. I know what you're going through. I've been there. First time I killed someone up close was Nasiriyah in 03. I can still see his face when I close my eyes. Still remember what he smelled like. That doesn't go away, Reaper. But you learn to live with it. You learn to carry it." "How?" Jake asked. "How do you carry this?" Viking was quiet for a long moment. "You remember why we were there. You remember those chains in that room. You remember those dead civilians. You remember that the men shooting at us weren't freedom fighters. They were murderers and torturers who would have done worse to us if we'd let them. Doesn't make killing easier, but it makes it necessary. And sometimes necessary is all we get." He stood, wincing again. "Get some rest. They're keeping you overnight for observation. Then you're back on light duty for 3 days. After that, we're going back out. The city's not clear yet. Back out. 3 days and then back to the patrols, the breaches, the constant threat of ambush and IED and sudden death." The thought made Jake's stomach clench, but what choice was there? The war was still happening whether he was ready or not. Viking left. Jake lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling again. The tent slowly emptied as the sun set. The worst of the day's casualties had been processed. The ones who would live were stabilized. The ones who wouldn't were in a different tent, having their personal effects cataloged and their bodies prepared for transport home. The frantic energy of the afternoon had given way to the exhausted routine of night shift. A nurse brought Jake an MRE. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten. Breakfast felt like it had been in another lifetime. He opened the packet mechanically. Chili Mac, his least favorite. He ate it anyway, forcing the food down despite his stomach's protests. His body needed calories, even if his mind couldn't process the concept of hunger. Around midnight, he finally fell into something resembling real sleep. But the dreams came immediately. He was back in the house, in the hallway. The insurgent was there, knife raised, but when Jake looked at his face, it wasn't the 17-year-old anymore. It was his own face. He was fighting himself, trying to kill himself, and he couldn't tell which one of him was real and which was the enemy. He woke with a gasp, heart hammering, sweat soaking through his shirt despite the cool night air. A nurse was there immediately, checking on him, her face concerned in the dim red light. "Just a nightmare," Jake managed. "I'm okay." But he wasn't okay. And lying about it wasn't making it any better. The rest of the night passed in fitful dozing, punctuated by waking in a panic, convinced for a moment that he was back in the house, that the walls were closing in, that the insurgents were coming through the floor. By the time dawn broke, Jake was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. He was soul tired, bone tired, tired in places that sleep couldn't reach. The nurse did a final check of his vitals, declared him fit for light duty, and cut him loose with instructions to report to the aid station if he experienced any dizziness, nausea, or vision problems. Jake nodded, took the paperwork, and walked out of the tent into the November morning. Fallujah was still burning. He could see the smoke on the horizon, hear the distant percussion of artillery and airstrikes. The battle for the city was ongoing. Other Marines were fighting and dying while he stood in relative safety at the field hospital. Doc found him standing there, staring at the city. The medic looked as tired as Jake felt, with fresh bandages peeking out from under his uniform where they'd finally treated the shrapnel wounds in his back. "You good?" Doc asked. "No," Jake said honestly. "But I'm functional." Doc nodded. That was the standard in Fallujah. Not good, but functional. Not healthy, but combat effective. The bar for acceptable human condition had been lowered to just still breathing and able to hold a rifle. "Viking got us quarters in a holding area," Doc said. "Footloose is already there. Ghost and Preacher got Medevac to Baghdad an hour ago. They'll be fine. Ghost will be back in a month. Preacher's done for this deployment. Lost too many fingers to hold a rifle properly." Preacher was going home. The thought should have made Jake envious, but instead it just made him feel guilty. Why did Preacher get to go home? Because he'd lost fingers? Jake had lost something too, something harder to quantify, but no less real. Where was his medical discharge? Where was his ticket out of this nightmare? But he knew the answer. Invisible wounds didn't count. Psychological damage didn't get you a Purple Heart. You could be shattered inside, and as long as you could still pull a trigger, you were fit for duty. They walked to the holding area, a tent city where Marines waited between operations, rested, reorganized, and prepared to go back into the grinder. Viking had secured them a corner of a tent with 6 cots. The 4 who remained, Viking, Doc, Footloose, and Jake. The Hell House survivors. It should have felt like victory. Should have felt like they'd accomplished something impossible and earned rest. Instead, it just felt like waiting for the next impossible thing. Jake lay down on his cot, stared at the tent fabric above him, and tried not to think about going back out. Tried not to think about the next house, the next breach, the next close quarters nightmare. Tried not to think about how many times you could survive hell before it finally kept you. 3 days, Viking had said. 3 days of rest, then back to combat operations. Jake closed his eyes and started counting down. 72 hours until the war reclaimed him. 72 hours to try to convince himself he could do this again. 72 hours to fail. The 3 days passed like fever dreams. Jake existed in a strange liminal space between the war and something resembling normalcy. The field hospital compound was safe, relatively. There were guard towers and concrete barriers and enough firepower to repel anything short of a battalion-level assault. But Fallujah was only 3 kilometers away, close enough that they could hear the fighting, see the smoke, feel the ground shake when something big exploded. Safe, but not really. Normal, but not quite. Day 1 was mostly sleep. Jake's body, finally given permission to rest, shut down completely. He slept for 16 hours straight, waking only when Doc shook him and forced water and food down his throat. The sleep was deep, but not restful, full of fragmented nightmares that he couldn't quite remember upon waking, but that left him sweating and gasping. Day 2 was worse. The initial shock and exhaustion had worn off, and what remained was raw awareness. Jake became hypervigilant, jumping at every loud noise, scanning every shadow for threats that weren't there. A generator backfired and he dove for cover, hand reaching for a rifle that wasn't on him. A door slammed and he was instantly back in the house, heart hammering, breath coming in short gasps. Doc recognized the signs immediately. PTSD, he said matter-of-factly. Post-traumatic stress, textbook shit, you need to talk to someone. I'm fine, Jake lied. You're not fine. None of us are fine, but you're especially not fine, and if you don't deal with it now, it's going to get worse. But there was no dealing with it. The mental health resources in a forward combat zone were limited to a chaplain who was overwhelmed with casualties and a Navy psychiatrist who had a waiting list 3 weeks long. Jake was expected to white-knuckle his way through the trauma, lean on his training, and be ready to go back to combat in 72 hours. So that's what he did. Day 3, Viking called them together for a debrief. The 4 survivors, Viking, Doc, Footloose, and Jake, sat in a corner of the tent while Viking outlined what had happened in the city since they'd been pulled out. The second Battle of Fallujah was entering its final phase. The Marines had secured most of the city, but pockets of resistance remained. House to house, fighting continued. IED strikes were constant. Sniper fire harassed patrols. The insurgents were dug in like ticks, and removing them required the same brutal, grinding close-quarters combat that had nearly killed the Hell House 6. Our platoon is attached to a clearing operation in the industrial district, Viking said, pointing to a hand-drawn map. Intel says there's a remaining insurgent command cell operating out of a warehouse complex. We go in tomorrow at 0600. Tomorrow. Back to combat operations. Back to breaching doors and clearing rooms and hoping the next house wasn't another trap. Jake's stomach clenched. He wasn't ready. Knew he'd never be ready, but ready or not, the war was happening. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay on his cot, staring at the darkness, listening to the distant sounds of artillery fire. Footloose was snoring on the next cot over. Somehow the kid could sleep through anything. Doc was reading a medical manual by Red Lens flashlight, constantly studying, constantly preparing. Viking was outside, smoking a cigar, probably doing his own mental preparation for going back in hell. Around 0200 hours, Jake gave up on sleep. He got up, pulled on his boots, and walked outside. The night air was cold and clean, a relief after the stale tent atmosphere. The stars were brilliant overhead, no light pollution this far from any functioning city infrastructure. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light. Jake found a spot on the perimeter berm and sat, staring out at the darkness where Fallujah burned. From here, the city looked almost beautiful. Fires flickering like candles, tracer rounds arcing across the sky like fireworks. The aesthetics of war, divorced from the reality of suffering and death. Can't sleep? Jake turned. Doc had followed him out, 2 cups of instant coffee in hand. He offered one to Jake, who took it gratefully. Thinking too much, Jake said. Doc sat beside him, sipping his coffee. About the house? About everything. The house, the kid I killed, going back out tomorrow. Jake paused. I don't know if I can do this again, Doc. I don't know if I've got another firefight in me. You do, Doc said with absolute certainty. You think you don't, but when it happens, your training will take over. Your body will do what it's been conditioned to do. You'll survive. And then what? Survive again? And again? How many times can you survive before Jake couldn't finish the sentence. Before you stop being human? Doc finished for him. That's the question, isn't it? The war wants to turn us into machines. Efficient killing machines that don't feel, don't question, don't break. But we're not machines. We're people. And people break. He was quiet for a moment, then continued. I've been to therapy. After my first deployment, I couldn't function. Had nightmares every night, couldn't hold down a job, pushed away everyone who cared about me. Finally got help. Took 2 years to feel even remotely normal. And you know what the therapist told me? She said combat trauma isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you're still human. The day you stop feeling anything is the day you need to worry. So this, Jake gestured vaguely at himself, the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the feeling like I'm about to crawl out of my own skin, that's normal? For what we've been through? Yeah. That's your brain trying to process the unprocessable, trying to make sense of things that don't make sense, trying to reconcile the person you were before the house with the person you are now. I don't know who I am now, Jake admitted. None of us do. We figure it out as we go, 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time if we have to. They sat in silence for a while, drinking bad coffee and watching the city burn. Finally, Doc spoke again. You know what gets me through? Knowing that what we did in that house mattered. We survived an impossible situation through skill and teamwork and sheer stubborn refusal to die. And yeah, we did things we'll have to live with, but we also stopped men who were doing evil things. Those chains in that room, those dead civilians, that's what we were fighting against. Remember that when the nightmares come. Jake wanted to feel the righteousness in Doc's words, wanted to believe that the violence they'd inflicted was justified, necessary, even good. But the kid's face kept appearing in his mind, 17 years old and dying on a dirty floor. And yes, he'd been trying to kill Jake first, but he'd also been a kid, brainwashed and radicalized and thrown into a war he probably didn't fully understand. The moral clarity Doc was offering felt like a luxury Jake couldn't afford. The world wasn't that simple. War wasn't that clean. But maybe that was okay. Maybe living with the ambiguity, with the uncomfortable questions and the lack of easy answers. Maybe that was what kept you human. They finished their coffee as dawn began to break over Fallujah. Pink and gold light painted the smoke-stained sky, transforming the burning city into something almost ethereal. A new day, another chance to survive or die. You ready? Doc asked. No, Jake said honestly, but I'll do it anyway. That's all any of us can do. They walked back to the tent to gear up for the mission. The industrial district was on the eastern edge of Fallujah, a maze of warehouses and factories that had been gutted by artillery and airstrikes. The buildings stood like broken teeth, their walls pockmarked with bullet holes, their roofs collapsed, their windows blown out. It looked like the end of the world. The platoon moved in 2 Humvee columns, Jake's squad in the second vehicle. The streets were eerily quiet, no civilian traffic, no movement in the windows, just the occasional feral dog scavenging through rubble. The insurgents had pulled back into defensive positions, waiting for the Marines to come to them. The convoy halted 2 blocks from the target warehouse. Viking gathered the squad for a final brief. Intel says there are approximately 15 to 20 insurgents holed up in the main warehouse building. They've had time to prepare positions, so expect fortifications, booby traps, and a determined defense. We're going in as part of a 2-squad assault. Alpha Squad breaches from the north, we breach from the south. Objective is to clear the building, capture or kill all hostiles, and secure any weapons or intel. He looked at each of them. This isn't like the house. We've got support this time. Tanks on standby, air assets on call, QRF ready to roll. We breach, we clear, we exfil. Questions? No one spoke. What was there to say? They all knew the drill. Breach, clear, survive. Repeat until you couldn't. They dismounted and moved on foot, using the rubble for concealment. Jake's heart rate kicked up with each step, his body flooding with adrenaline despite his best efforts to stay calm. The warehouse loomed ahead, a large rectangular structure with a corrugated metal roof and concrete walls. Multiple entry points, main doors on the south side, loading bay doors on the east, smaller personnel doors scattered around the perimeter. Alpha Squad moved to their position on the north side. Viking Squad, now just 4 men plus 2 attached Marines from another squad to bring them up to strength, stacked on the south entrance. Jake was point man again, always point man. First through the door, first to die if things went wrong. The position had become his identity, his curse, his fate. Footloose placed the breaching charge, a linear cutting charge designed to blow the door off its hinges. His hands were steady, despite the wounds to both shoulders, despite the fact that 3 days ago he'd been crying in the back of a dying house. Viking checked his watch, synchronized breach in 30 seconds. He held up his hand, counting down with fingers. 20 seconds. Jake flipped his night vision down. The warehouse entrance glowed green in the artificial light. 10 seconds. His finger moved to the trigger. Safety off. Controlled breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. 5 seconds. The world narrowed to the door, the rifle, the moment. 3, 2, 1. The breaching charge detonated with a sharp crack. The door blew inward and Jake rushed through the smoke and dust into the warehouse interior, and immediately knew something was wrong. The warehouse was too dark, too quiet. His night vision should have shown him the interior layout, should have revealed insurgent positions, should have given him targets. Instead, it showed him nothing. The warehouse was empty. "Hold!" Viking shouted. "Something's..." The floor exploded, not everywhere, just specific points where pressure plates had been concealed under dust and debris. IEDs daisy-chained together, designed to detonate when the assault force was inside the kill box. Jake was thrown backward by the blast, his world turning into fire and noise and flying debris. He hit the ground hard, his helmet cracking against concrete, his vision whiting out. When his senses returned, seconds later, maybe minutes, impossible to tell, his ears were ringing so badly he couldn't hear anything except a high-pitched whine. Smoke filled the air, so thick he couldn't see more than a meter in any direction, even with night vision. He tried to stand. His legs wouldn't cooperate. He looked down and saw blood, lots of blood, soaking through his uniform pants. Shrapnel. He'd taken shrapnel to his left leg. Gunfire erupted from the darkness. Muzzle flashes strobed through the smoke. The insurgents hadn't abandoned the warehouse. They'd been waiting in concealed positions, letting the Marines enter the trap before springing it. Jake fired back blindly, tracking the muzzle flashes, putting rounds downrange. His rifle bucked in his hands. Spent casings ejected and disappeared into the smoke. He couldn't tell if he was hitting anything, couldn't even tell if he was shooting at insurgents or at shadows. Someone grabbed his drag handle and pulled. Doc's face appeared through the smoke, shouting something Jake couldn't hear through the ringing in his ears. They retreated, Doc dragging Jake toward the entrance, both of them firing as they moved. Other shapes appeared. Viking, Footloose, the 2 attached Marines. Everyone was moving. Everyone was shooting. The warehouse had become a hell of intersecting fire and no clear targets. They made it outside and took cover behind a concrete barrier. Doc immediately went to work on Jake's leg, cutting away the uniform pants to expose the wounds. Multiple shrapnel penetrations, bleeding heavily, but no arterial spray. Doc packed the wounds with hemostatic gauze, wrapped them tight, jabbed Jake with a morphine auto-injector. The morphine hit Jake's system like a warm wave, dulling the pain, making everything feel distant and dreamlike. Viking was on the radio, calling for fire support. Actual, Reaper 6, we walked into a trap, multiple IEDs, taking heavy fire from prepared positions, requesting immediate fire mission on the warehouse. Danger close. The response came back quickly. Reaper 6, roger. Air support inbound, ETA 2 minutes, get your people clear. Viking looked at his squad. 3 of the 6 Marines who'd entered were wounded. Jake with shrapnel, footloose, with what looked like a broken arm from the blast. One of the attached Marines unconscious and bleeding from a head wound. The other 3 were functional, but running on fumes. Pull back to the Humvees, Viking ordered. Nah! They moved in a fighting retreat, carrying and dragging the wounded. Return fire from the warehouse chased them, rounds sparking off the ground and pinging off the Humvees as they loaded up. Jake found himself in the back of the Humvee again, Doc working on him, the morphine making everything feel surreal. Through the rear window, he watched the warehouse. 2 F-16s screamed overhead, low enough that the roar of their engines penetrated even Jake's damaged hearing. They released their ordnance, J-dams, precision-guided bombs, and pulled up in steep climbs. The warehouse ceased to exist. The building didn't just explode, it was erased. The J-dams punched through the roof and detonated inside, the blast ripping the structure apart from within. The walls blew outward. The roof lifted up and came apart in spinning fragments. A mushroom cloud of dust and smoke rose hundreds of feet into the air. Any insurgents who'd been inside were vaporized, turned into component atoms and scattered across the rubble. The Humvee convoy sped away as secondary explosions cooked off. Ammunition, RPGs, whatever ordnance the insurgents had stored in the warehouse. The whole district lit up like the 4th of July, but there was nothing celebratory about it. Jake watched the destruction through the morphine haze and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just exhaustion so profound it made his bones ache. They'd survived another engagement. Barely. 3 more wounded, 1 possibly dead. The attached Marine with the head wound wasn't moving, and Doc's face when he checked for a pulse told the story. This was supposed to be easier than the house. They'd had support this time. Armor on standby. Air assets on call. QRF ready. And they'd still nearly been killed. How many more times could they roll the dice before the odds caught up with them? The Humvee carried them back to the field hospital, the same place they'd left that morning. Same tents, same medics, same exhausted routine of triage and treatment. Jake was carried into a trauma bay where a different doctor examined his leg. More x-rays, more probing, more pain that the morphine couldn't quite cover. Multiple shrapnel wounds, nothing arterial, no bone damage, the doctor announced. You're lucky. We'll clean it out, stitch you up, and you'll be good to go in a few days. Lucky again. That word kept coming up. Jake was starting to hate it. The procedure took an hour, picking shrapnel out of his leg with forceps, irrigating the wounds, stitching the deeper ones. Jake watched the ceiling and tried not to think about anything. The morphine helped with that. When it was done, he was given crutches and sent to the recovery area. Same tent he'd been in 3 days ago. Same cots, same smell of antiseptic and blood. Viking found him there, limping on his own injuries. You good? Define good, Jake said. Viking cracked a smile, tired but genuine. Fair point. Doc says you're off combat duty for a week, maybe 2. Light duty only until the leg heals. A week off. Should have felt like a reprieve. Instead, it felt like a delay. A temporary pause before the inevitable return to the grinder. The squad? Jake asked. Footloose has a broken radius. He's out for 6 weeks minimum. The attached Marine didn't make it. Died in transit. Massive head trauma. The other one's critical, but stable. Viking paused. We're down to just you, me, and Doc for combat effective personnel. They're pulling us off the line until we get replacements. Off the line. No more missions. No more breaches. No more close quarters nightmares. Jake should have felt relief. Should have felt grateful. Instead, he felt guilt. His squad had been torn apart, Marines had died, and all he could feel was selfish gratitude that he got to rest. What kind of Marine did that make him? Viking seemed to read his mind. Don't do that to yourself, Reaper. Don't feel guilty for surviving. We all do what we can, and sometimes the best we can do is not die. That's enough. But it didn't feel like enough. It never felt like enough. Viking left. Jake lay back on the cot and stared at the tent ceiling, counting the hours until the morphine wore off and the pain came back. Physical pain he could handle. It was everything else that was killing him. The morphine wore off around midnight and the pain came roaring back. Not just the physical pain, though that was bad enough. His leg throbbing in time with his heartbeat, the stitches pulling tight whenever he shifted position. But worse was the other pain, the kind that had no physiological source, no wound to point to and say, there, that's where it hurts. Jake lay on the cot in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the field hospital at night. Generators humming, wounded men groaning in their sleep, nurses making their rounds with soft footsteps, the distant percussion of artillery fire from the city. The war never stopped, never slept, never gave anyone a moment's peace. His leg wasn't the problem. The shrapnel wounds would heal. The stitches would dissolve. In a few weeks, he'd barely have scars. The human body was remarkably resilient, capable of recovering from incredible damage given time and proper treatment. But what about the damage you couldn't see? What about the part of him that had stayed in the hell house, soaked into the blood-stained concrete, along with the insurgent's life? What about the piece of his soul he'd left on that warehouse floor when the IEDs detonated? How did you heal from wounds that didn't bleed? A corpsman appeared with pain medication, not morphine this time, just Motrin and Tylenol, the military's answer to everything from hangnails to, traumatic amputation. Jake took them anyway, knowing they wouldn't touch the real pain. Can't sleep? The corpsman asked, his voice kind. No. You want something stronger? I can get the doc to prescribe. No, Jake said quickly. He'd seen too many guys go down the prescription drug rabbit hole, trading combat trauma for chemical dependency. I'm good. Just thinking too much. The corpsman nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd probably heard the same thing from 100 wounded Marines. Well, if you change your mind, let me know. We're here to help. After he left, Jake tried to sleep, closed his eyes, controlled his breathing, tried to relax his muscles, all the techniques they'd taught in training for managing stress and improving rest. None of it worked. The moment his eyes closed, he was back in the house, in the hallway, the insurgent lunging at him with the knife, the blade catching light as it descended, the struggle, the KA bar punching through flesh, the kid's eyes going wide with shock and fear, and the dawning realization that he was dying. Jake's eyes snapped open, his heart racing. He was covered in cold sweat despite the cool night air. His hands were shaking. His breath came in short, sharp gasps that he couldn't quite control. Panic attack. He was having a panic attack. He sat up, put his head between his knees, tried to breathe. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. The breathing technique they'd taught for managing stress, it barely helped. Reaper? Doc's voice cut through the panic. The medic appeared from the darkness, his face concerned. He'd been sleeping on a cot nearby, keeping an eye on the wounded from his squad like he always did. Can't breathe, Jake managed to gasp out. Yes, you can. Look at me. Doc knelt beside the cot, his presence solid and calm. You're having a panic attack. It feels like you're dying, but you're not. Your body is reacting to trauma. Just breathe with me. In, out, out. Doc breathed with him, exaggerating the rhythm, making it easy to follow. Slowly, painfully slowly, Jake's breathing normalized. His heart rate came down. The tunnel vision receded. The world stopped feeling like it was ending. Better? Doc asked. Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. This is going to keep happening, Doc said quietly. The panic attacks, the nightmares, the hypervigilance. It's your brain trying to process trauma. It's going to get worse before it gets better. How much worse? Doc was quiet for a moment. That depends. Some guys, it peaks a few weeks after the traumatic event and then starts to fade. Other guys, it gets progressively worse for months, years even. The ones who don't get help. He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. They'd both seen the statistics on veteran suicide. I don't know how to do this, Jake admitted. I don't know how to be this person, the one who jumps at loud noises and can't sleep and feels like he's losing his mind. You don't have to figure it out alone. That's what I'm trying to tell you. There are people who can help, therapists who specialize in combat trauma, support groups, medication if you need it. But you have to ask for help. You have to admit you need it. And if I do? If I tell the docs I'm having panic attacks and nightmares, they'll pull me from combat duty, medical discharge maybe. And then what? I go home and try to explain to people who've never been here why I can't function like a normal human being anymore. Doc's face hardened. Is staying in combat better? Getting killed because you can't focus? Getting your brothers killed because you freeze at the wrong moment? Because that's where this is heading if you don't deal with it. The words hit like a physical blow. Jake knew Doc was right, knew that his deteriorating mental state was a liability, not just to himself, but to everyone around him. A Marine who couldn't trust his own mind was as dangerous as a Marine with a malfunctioning weapon. But the thought of leaving, of going home, of trying to reintegrate into civilian life while carrying this weight, that felt impossible too. He was trapped, caught between a war that was destroying him and a home he couldn't return to. No good options, just bad choices and worse ones. Think about it, Doc said, standing up. That's all I'm asking. Just think about getting help for yourself and for the guys who depend on you. He returned to his cot, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. The rest of the night passed in restless half-sleep, punctuated by nightmares and panic that Jake learned to ride out in silence. By the time dawn broke, he felt like he'd been awake for days. The next week passed in a blur of medical appointments and enforced idleness. The leg was healing well, the stitches held, no signs of infection, the pain decreasing each day. Physically, Jake was recovering. The doctors were pleased with his progress, but the mental deterioration continued. Day 3, a helicopter flew over the compound and the rotor noise triggered a full flashback. Jake found himself on the ground, hands over his head, convinced he was back in the house with the DShK firing. It took Viking 10 minutes to talk him down, to convince him he was safe, that it was just a helicopter, that the war wasn't happening right now. Day 5, he got into a fight with another Marine over nothing. The guy had bumped into him in the chow line, and Jake had exploded, shoving him, ready to throw punches, all the rage and fear and frustration pouring out in a burst of violence. Doc and Viking had to pull him off before it escalated further. Day 7, he broke down crying in the shower. No reason, no trigger, just suddenly overwhelmed by everything, the weight of it all crushing down, and he found himself sitting on the shower floor with water streaming over him, sobbing like a child. This wasn't who he was. This wasn't the Marine he'd been when he arrived in Fallujah. Something fundamental had broken inside him and he didn't know how to fix it. On day 8, Viking sat him down for a conversation Jake had been dreading. "I'm pulling you from the squad," Viking said without preamble. "Not as punishment, as preservation. You're not fit for combat right now, and if I send you back out there, you're going to get yourself killed, or get someone else killed." Jake wanted to argue, wanted to insist he was fine, that he could handle it, that he just needed more time. But the words stuck in his throat because they were lies, and both of them knew it. "What happens now?" Jake asked. "You're going to see the battalion psychiatrist. You're going to be honest about what you're experiencing, and you're going to follow whatever treatment plan they recommend, even if that means medication or therapy or temporary reassignment away from combat operations. They'll medboard me, send me home. Maybe, maybe not. But if they do, that's better than sending your body home in a flag drape box." Viking's face softened. You did your job, Reaper. You did more than your job. You survived impossible shit and kept your brothers alive in the process. Nobody's questioning your courage or your commitment, but courage doesn't mean destroying yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you need help. The appointment with the battalion psychiatrist was scheduled for the next day. The psychiatrist was a Navy commander named Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering. Her office was a converted shipping container with a desk, 2 chairs, and a confidentiality agreement posted on the wall. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Corporal Morrison, your squad leader, has expressed concern about your mental state. I've reviewed your combat history, the incident at the house, the warehouse engagement, your wounds. Tell me what you're experiencing. Jake hesitated. Every instinct told him to lie, to say he was fine, to not show weakness. But Doc's words echoed in his mind. You have to ask for help. So he told her everything. The nightmares, the flashbacks, the panic attacks, the rage that came out of nowhere, the feeling of being disconnected from reality, like he was watching his own life from outside his body, the guilt over surviving when others died, the certainty that he was losing his mind. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, taking occasional notes. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What you're describing is classic acute stress disorder, which will likely develop into post-traumatic stress disorder if left untreated, she said finally. Your brain has been exposed to extreme trauma, multiple traumatic events in a short period, and it's reacting exactly how we'd expect it to react. You're not losing your mind, Corporal. Your mind is functioning normally in response to abnormal circumstances. Doesn't feel normal, Jake muttered. I'm sure it doesn't. But here's what I want you to understand. What you're experiencing is a wound, just like the shrapnel in your leg. It's an injury that requires treatment. And just like you wouldn't try to walk on a broken leg without medical care, you can't function with untreated psychological trauma. She outlined a treatment plan, medication to help with the panic attacks and sleep, weekly therapy sessions focusing on trauma processing, possible temporary reassignment to non-combat duties to reduce stress exposure. And if I refuse treatment, Jake asked, then I'll be forced to recommend you be removed from combat operations anyway, because you're a liability. At least with treatment, you have a chance of recovery and possible return to duty. Without it, you're looking at medical discharge or worse. It wasn't really a choice, accept help or be forced out. But framing it that way made it easier somehow. Removed the stigma, made it a tactical decision rather than an admission of weakness. Okay, Jake said, I'll do the treatment. Dr. Chen's expression softened. That's a good decision, Corporal. Not an easy one, I know, but a good one. We'll start with medication today. A low dose of an SSRI for the anxiety and depression, and something to help you sleep. You'll need to take it daily, and it'll take a few weeks to build up in your system. Side effects might include nausea, headaches, changes in appetite, but most people adjust within a week or two. She wrote out the prescriptions and handed them over. First therapy session is scheduled for 3 days from now. Between now and then, I want you to keep a journal. Write down when the nightmares happen, when you have flashbacks, what triggers them. It'll help us identify patterns and develop coping strategies. Jake took the prescriptions, feeling strange. He was officially a mental health patient now, taking psych meds in therapy. The kind of thing he'd always associated with weakness, with failure, with being broken beyond repair. But maybe that was okay. Maybe being broken was just the first step toward being fixed. The medication took effect over the next few days. The first 2 days were rough. Nausea, headaches, a weird feeling of detachment that made everything seem slightly unreal. But by day 3, some of the worst symptoms had started to ease. The panic attacks didn't disappear, but they became less frequent, less intense. The nightmares continued, but he slept through the night more often than not. The hypervigilance was still there, but it felt more manageable, less like his nervous system was constantly on fire. Small improvements, but improvements nonetheless. The first therapy session was uncomfortable. Dr. Chen asked him to talk about the house in detail. Every moment, every sensation, every emotion. Jake resisted at first, not wanting to relive it, but she was insistent. The trauma is stuck in your nervous system, she explained. Your brain processed the event as a life-threatening emergency and filed it in a way that keeps triggering your fight-or-flight response. We need to reprocess the memory, help your brain understand that the threat is over, that you survived. So, Jake talked. Described the breach, the firefight, the kid with the knife. Felt the emotions wash over him, fear, rage, guilt, grief. Cried at parts he didn't expect to cry at. Sat in silence at others, unable to find words. Dr. Chen guided him through it with practiced skill, asking questions, offering observations, never judging. By the end of the hour, Jake felt wrung out, but somehow lighter, like a pressure valve had been released. That was hard, Dr. Chen said, but you did good work today. This is going to take time, weeks, maybe months, but you will get through this. I promise you that. Jake wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that time and medication and therapy could fix what Fallujah had broken. But belief was hard when the evidence of his brokenness was everywhere he looked. 2 weeks after starting treatment, Jake received news that shifted everything. He was being Medevac to Germany for advanced treatment. The leg was healed enough for travel, and the psychiatric team at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center had better resources for dealing with combat trauma. From there, pending evaluation, he might be sent back to the States for continued care. He was leaving Fallujah, leaving the war, leaving his squad. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. His brothers were still here, still fighting, and he was going home. Ghost and Preacher had been wounded badly enough to earn evacuation, but Jake's wounds were invisible, psychological, the kind that felt like cheating. He expressed this to Dr. Chen in their final session before evacuation. That guilt is part of the trauma, she said gently. Survivor's guilt is incredibly common in combat veterans. You feel like you should have stayed, should have kept fighting, should have been the one who got hurt worse instead of going home. But that's your disorder talking, not reality. You earned evacuation through your wounds, both physical and psychological. You're not abandoning anyone. You're getting the treatment you need to eventually function again. What if I can't? Jake asked. What if I go through all the treatment and I'm still broken? What if I can't ever be normal again? Then we'll find a new normal. Recovery doesn't mean going back to who you were before Fallujah. That person is gone. Combat changes everyone who experiences it. Recovery means building a new life with the person you are now, finding ways to function and thrive despite the trauma. It's possible, Corporal. I've seen it happen with hundreds of Marines. You can have a life after this. It just won't be the life you imagined. The day of evacuation arrived cold and clear. A Humvee took Jake to the LZ, where a C-130 waited to fly him to Baghdad, then Germany, then eventually home. Viking, Doc, and Footloose came to see him off. Ghost and Preacher were already in Germany, recovering from their surgeries. The Hell House 6, scattered across 3 continents now, probably would never all be in the same place again. Viking pulled Jake aside for a final word. You did good, Reaper. Better than good. You kept your head when it mattered, killed when you had to, and survived when the odds said you wouldn't. That's all anyone can ask. Doesn't feel like enough, Jake said. It never does, but it's all we've got. Viking gripped his shoulder. Get your head right, deal with your shit, and if you can, come back to us. The Marines need good men, and you're one of the best. Doc gave him a hug. Quick, awkward, but genuine. Remember what I told you. One day at a time. And if it gets too dark, you call someone. Promise me." "I promise." Footloose just grinned, his arm still in a cast. "Don't become a civilian on us, Reaper. We'll see you back here soon." But Jake knew he wouldn't be back. Knew that this was goodbye to the war, to the squad, to the version of himself who'd walked through that blue door 3 weeks ago. That Jake Morrison was dead, had died in the Hell House, along with the insurgent whose face he still saw every night. What remained was someone new, someone damaged, someone trying to figure out how to exist in a world where death didn't lurk around every corner. The C-130's engines roared to life. Jake climbed aboard, found a seat among pallets of equipment and other wounded Marines being evacuated. The ramp closed. The plane taxied, then lifted off. Through a small window, Jake watched Fallujah recede below him. The city looked small from the air, insignificant, just another cluster of buildings in a desert that stretched to the horizon. Hard to believe that place had nearly killed him, had definitely broken him, had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. The plane banked west, toward Baghdad, toward Germany, toward home. Jake closed his eyes and tried to imagine what came next. He couldn't. The future was blank, unknowable, terrifying in its uncertainty. But for the first time in 3 weeks, he wasn't actively dying. And maybe that was enough for now. 3 months later, Bakersfield, California. Jake sat on the porch of his childhood home, staring at a street he'd known his entire life, but that now felt like it belonged to a different planet. January 2005. 3 months since Fallujah. 3 months since the Hell House. 3 months of treatment at Landstuhl, then Walter Reed. Then finally medical leave to recuperate at home before the Marine Corps decided what to do with him. The leg had healed completely. The scars from the shrapnel were barely visible, thin white lines against tanned skin that you'd never notice unless you knew to look for them. Physically, he was whole. The doctors had cleared him for full duty pending psychiatric evaluation, but the other wounds, those hadn't healed at all. The street was quiet on this Sunday evening. Kids riding bikes, a neighbor washing his car. The mundane rhythm of suburban American life that Jake had once taken for granted and now found utterly alien. These people had no idea, no concept of what it was like to fight for your life in a concrete tomb while a heavy machine gun tried to tear you apart. No understanding of what it felt like to kill someone with your hands, to feel their life drain away while their blood soaked your uniform. They lived in a different world, a world of mortgages and soccer practice and what to have for dinner. A world where the greatest threat was traffic on the 99 or a bad quarterly earnings report. Jake had fought to protect this world, had bled for it, had lost pieces of himself to keep these people safe and comfortable and blissfully ignorant of the horrors happening in cities they couldn't pronounce in countries they couldn't find on a map. And now he was supposed to just rejoin it? Pretend he was the same person who'd left Bakersfield 3 years ago, young and eager and certain that he was doing something important. The screen door creaked open behind him. His mother appeared, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. Maria Morrison, 53 years old, graying at the temples, worry lines etched deep around her eyes, lines that had gotten deeper since Jake came home. "Mijo," she said softly, handing him a glass. "You've been out here for hours. Come inside. I made enchiladas. Your favorite." Jake took the glass, but didn't drink. "Thanks, Mom. I'll come in soon." She sat beside him on the porch swing, the chains creaking under the added weight. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, "You're not sleeping." It wasn't a question. "I sleep," Jake said. A lie. He managed maybe 3 or 4 hours a night, broken by nightmares that left him gasping and sweating, and convinced he was back in Iraq. "You're not eating. The enchiladas from last night are still in the fridge, untouched. You're losing weight." "I eat enough." Another lie. Food tasted like ash in his mouth. Everything did. The doctor said it was depression, a common symptom of PTSD, that it would improve with time and medication. But the medication made him feel numb and disconnected, and he wasn't sure which was worse, feeling everything or feeling nothing. His mother was quiet for a moment, then, carefully, "There's a veterans group that meets at the church on Thursday nights. Men who've been to war, who understand what you're going through. Father Miguel suggested you might want to..." "No," Jake said, more sharply than he intended. "I don't need a support group. I just need time." Time. That's what everyone kept telling him. Give it time, it gets easier with time. Time heals all wounds. But 3 months had passed and nothing was easier. If anything, it was getting harder. The distance from the war should have helped, but instead it just made him feel more isolated, more alienated, more certain that he'd never fit back into the world he'd left behind. His mother didn't push, just sat with him in silence, offering the only thing she could, presence. After a while, she went back inside, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his glass of iced tea he wouldn't drink. The sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Jake of Fallujah burning. Everything reminded him of Fallujah. The diesel smell from a passing truck, the sound of a helicopter overhead, the way shadows fell across buildings in the late afternoon light. He was home, but he'd never left the war. It lived in his nervous system, in his dreams, in every hypervigilant scan of his surroundings, and every flinch at sudden sounds. The war had colonized his mind and showed no signs of leaving. His little sister Emma came out as darkness fell. 16 years old now, though he still thought of her as the 12-year-old he'd left behind. She sat on the porch steps, hugging her knees, not looking at him. "You were going to help me with my college applications," she said quietly. "You promised before you left, but now you're back and you won't even talk to me." Guilt stabbed through Jake's chest. "I'm sorry, Em. I've just been, I know, dealing with stuff." Her voice was small, hurt. "But I miss you, Jake. You're here, but you're not here. It's like you're a ghost of my brother, not actually him." The words hit harder than she probably intended. A ghost. That's exactly what he was. The real Jake Morrison had died in Fallujah. What came home was just a shell wearing his face, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. "I don't know how to be your brother anymore," Jake admitted. "I don't know how to be anyone anymore. Everything I was before, it's gone, and I don't know what's left." Emma finally looked at him, tears in her eyes. "What's left is you. You're still my brother. You're still Mom and Dad's son. You're still Jake. You just need to remember that." But he couldn't remember. Couldn't access the person he'd been before the war. That Jake felt like a fictional character, someone he'd read about in a book or seen in a movie, not a person he'd actually been. Emma went back inside, and Jake was alone again with the darkness and his thoughts. His father found him there around midnight. Robert Morrison, 58, a Vietnam veteran, who'd done 2 tours with the 1st Cavalry Division and never talked about it. He sat on the porch swing, silent for a long time, just smoking a cigarette and staring at the night. Finally, "I know that look, son. I had that look in 72 when I came back from Hugh. Thought I was going crazy. Couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, jumped at every sound. Your mother had to talk me down from the ledge more times than I can count." Jake turned to look at his father. They'd never talked about Vietnam. His dad had made it clear years ago that the war was off limits, a door that stayed closed. But apparently tonight that door was opening. "How long did it take?" Jake asked. "Before you felt normal again?" His father took a long drag on his cigarette, the ember glowing red in the darkness. "Define normal. I never went back to who I was before. That kid who joined the army at 18, full of patriotism and certainty about right and wrong, he died in Vietnam. Died in 100 small ways in 100 firefights I can still see when I close my eyes." So it doesn't get better? I didn't say that. It gets different. You learn to live with it. The nightmares fade, not completely, but they get less frequent. The hypervigilance becomes background noise instead of constant screaming. You find ways to function, to build a life around the damage." He paused. "But you have to want to build that life. Have to choose, every day, to keep going instead of giving up. And some days that choice is going to be hard as hell." "What if I can't?" Jake's voice cracked. "What if I'm too broken?" "Then you ask for help. You lean on people who love you. You see the doctors, take the medication, go to therapy, whatever it takes. Pride doesn't matter. Being tough doesn't matter. Surviving matters. Living matters. Finding a reason to keep breathing matters." His father stubbed out his cigarette and stood. "You're my son. You're a Marine. You survived shit that would have killed most men. You're not too broken to put back together. You're just wounded, and wounds heal, if you let them." He went inside, leaving Jake with those words echoing in the darkness. Wounds heal if you let them. Was he letting them heal? Or was he holding on to the pain, using it to punish himself for surviving when others hadn't? Jake didn't have an answer. 6 months later, San Diego, California. The VA hospital waiting room was crowded with ghosts. Not literal ghosts, though sometimes Jake wondered, but men who looked like him, hollow-eyed, damaged, carrying invisible wounds that were slowly killing them from the inside out. Iraq veterans, Afghanistan veterans, Vietnam vets who'd been fighting this battle for 40 years, all of them waiting to see understaffed doctors in an overwhelmed system that was trying its best and failing anyway. Jake sat among them, waiting for his name to be called for his weekly therapy session with Dr. Patricia Valdez. 6 months of treatment now, 6 months of medication adjustments and cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure therapy and every other therapeutic intervention modern psychology had to offer. And he was better. Marginally. The panic attacks were less frequent. The nightmares still came, but not every night. He could go to the grocery store without having a flashback when someone dropped something and it made a loud noise. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. The Marine Corps had medically retired him 3 months ago. Honorable discharge, disability benefits, all the paperwork that said he'd served with distinction and been broken in service to his country. He wore civilian clothes now, worked part-time at a veterans outreach center, tried to figure out what came next. "Jake Morrison?" A nurse stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Jake followed her to Dr. Valdez's office, a small room with a desk, 2 chairs, and inspirational posters about resilience and healing that had probably been designed by someone who'd never experienced real trauma. Dr. Valdez was a middle-aged Latina woman with kind eyes and infinite patience. She'd been working with combat veterans for 20 years and had probably heard every story, seen every symptom, guided hundreds of broken soldiers through the long road to recovery. "How was your week?" she asked, the same question she always started with. "Better," Jake said, and meant it. "Only 2 nightmares. No panic attacks. I actually went to a movie with a friend from the outreach center." "That's good progress. What movie?" "Some action film. Lots of explosions." He smiled grimly. "Probably not the best choice for someone with PTSD, but I made it through without a flashback, so I'm counting it as a win." Dr. Valdez made a note. "And the guilt? The survivor's guilt we've been working on?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Still there. I got a call from Doc last week. He's in Afghanistan now, 3rd deployment. Still a combat medic, still putting himself in harm's way. And here I am, safe in San Diego, drinking coffee and talking about my feelings. How is that fair?" It's not fair. War isn't fair. Trauma isn't fair. But you're not dishonoring your brothers by healing. You're honoring them by surviving, by building a life, by trying to be whole again. They'd want that for you. Would they? Jake wasn't sure. Sometimes he thought they'd be disgusted that he'd taken the easy way out, let his psychological wounds be his ticket home while they kept fighting. Other times he thought Doc would approve, would be glad Jake was getting help instead of self-destructing. "I've been thinking about going back to school," Jake said, changing the subject, "using my GI Bill, maybe studying psychology or social work, helping other veterans deal with combat trauma." Dr. Valdez's face lit up. "That's an excellent goal. Turning your experience into something constructive, finding meaning in the suffering, that's crucial for recovery. What's holding you back?" "Fear, I guess. Fear that I'll fail, that I'm too damaged to help anyone else, that I'll be in class and have a flashback in front of everyone and prove that I'm broken beyond repair. Those fears are normal, but they're also predictions, not facts. You don't know what will happen until you try. And even if you do have a flashback in class, that doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. Humans have limits, and you've been pushed beyond yours, but limits can expand with time and practice." They talked for the rest of the hour about goals and fears and the slow, unglamorous work of healing. By the end, Jake felt marginally more hopeful about the future. Not confident, but hopeful. And hope was something. 1 year later, November 10th, 2005, Jake sat in his apartment, a small one-bedroom in North Park, with a letter in his hands and tears streaming down his face. It was from Ghost. Marcus Chen had been killed in Afghanistan. IED strike on his convoy. He'd survived the Hell House only to die on a dusty road in another war, in another country, fighting an enemy that would probably never stop fighting back. The letter was from Ghost's sister, letting Jake know about the funeral, thanking him for being Ghost's brother in arms, saying that Marcus had spoken highly of Jake in his letters home, that he'd been proud to serve with him. Jake stared at the letter until the words blurred, grief and guilt and rage all mixing together into something overwhelming and terrible. Ghost was dead. Preacher had lost his fingers and was trying to build a new life as a pastor in Alabama. Footloose was drinking himself to death in Boston, according to the last update Jake had heard. Doc was still deployed, still saving lives, still tempting fate. Viking was training new Marines at Camp Pendleton, teaching them the skills they'd need to survive their own hells. And Jake was here, alive, safe, attending San Diego State University, studying psychology, working toward a degree that would let him help other veterans. Survivor's guilt crashed over him in waves. Why was he alive when Ghost was dead? What made him special, deserving of survival, when better men had died? There was no answer. Just the random chaos of war, of IEDs and bullets and bad luck. Ghost had rolled the dice one too many times and come up snake eyes, that's all. No cosmic justice, no divine plan, just chance and circumstance and the brutal mathematics of combat. Jake thought about the pills in his medicine cabinet, the Ambien he took for sleep. How easy it would be to take all of them, to end the guilt and the pain and the constant struggle to function in a world that felt fundamentally wrong. But then he thought about what Doc had made him promise back at the field hospital. If it gets too dark, you call someone. Jake pulled out his phone and called his father. Robert Morrison answered on the second ring. "Jake, you okay?" "No," Jake said, his voice breaking. "I'm not okay. Ghost is dead, and I want to be dead too, and I don't know how to keep doing this." "Where are you?" "My apartment." "Stay there. I'm 20 minutes away. Don't do anything until I get there. You hear me? Promise me you won't do anything." "I promise." 20 minutes later, his father was there. They sat on Jake's couch, and Jake cried, deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place beyond words. His father held him, this man who'd fought his own war and carried his own ghosts, offering the only thing he could, presence and understanding, and the knowledge that Jake wasn't alone. "It's going to keep hurting," his father said eventually. "Every time you hear about another one dying, it's going to rip you open again, but you have to keep living. have to keep fighting, because the alternative, giving up, letting the war win, that dishonors everyone who didn't make it home. How? Jake asked. How do I keep going when it hurts this much? One day at a time. 1 hour at a time if you have to. You wake up, you put one foot in front of the other, and you do the next right thing. And when you can't, you ask for help. That's all any of us can do. Jake spent that night on his father's couch in Bakersfield, under the same roof he'd grown up in, surrounded by family who loved him, despite not fully understanding what he was going through. It didn't fix anything, didn't bring ghosts back or erase the guilt or make the pain stop, but it kept him alive. And sometimes that was enough. 10 years later, November 10th, 2014, Jake sat in his office at the VA hospital in San Diego, a photo on his desk showing 6 Marines in full combat gear, young and alive and unaware of what was coming. The Hell House 6. All of them smiling for the camera a week before the battle that would break them all in different ways. Ghost, dead in Afghanistan, 2005. Preacher, alive, pastor in Alabama, still dealing with phantom pain from missing fingers and deeper pains from missing innocence. Footloose, dead by his own hand in 2008, a suicide that no one saw coming and everyone should have. Doc, retired from the military, emergency room doctor in Brooklyn, saving lives until it finally saved him too. Viking, sergeant major now, still training Marines, still carrying the weight of every soldier he'd led into combat. And Jake, therapist specializing in combat trauma, helping other veterans navigate the impossible journey from war to peace. 10 years, a decade since the Hell House, and Jake was functional. Not whole, he'd never be whole again, but functional. He had a life, a job that mattered, relationships that worked, days where he didn't think about Fallujah at all. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. The hypervigilance had faded into general anxiety. The guilt was still there, but had transformed from a crushing weight into something more like background noise, always present, but no longer debilitating. He'd built a life from the wreckage, not the life he'd imagined as a young Marine, but a life nonetheless. A knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. A young veteran stood there, mid-20s, haunted eyes, the unmistakable look of someone fresh from a war zone and drowning in trauma. Dr. Morrison, I'm Ryan Kowalski. I have a 2 p.m. appointment. Kowalski, Jake's heart clenched. Any relation to Staff Sergeant Dane Kowalski? The young man's face lit up with recognition. He's my uncle. He's the one who told me to come see you. Said you'd understand what I'm going through. Jake gestured to the chair. Have a seat, Ryan. Tell me what brought you here. And as the young Marine began to speak, haltingly at first, then with increasing desperation, about firefights and guilt and nightmares and the feeling of being broken beyond repair, Jake listened with the understanding of someone who'd walked that same dark path. He didn't have all the answers. Couldn't promise that healing would be fast or easy or complete. But he could offer hope, born from his own survival, tempered by his own losses, strengthened by a decade of doing the hard work of staying alive. You're not alone, Jake said when the young Marine finished. What you're feeling, the guilt, the fear, the certainty that you'll never be normal again, I've felt all of it. And I'm here to tell you that you can survive this. It won't be easy. It's going to take time and work and more courage than you needed in combat, but you can survive. You can build a life after war. I know, because I did. Ryan Kowalski's eyes filled with desperate hope. How? How did you do it? Jake thought about the answer. Thought about the pills he'd almost taken, the nights his father had talked him down, the therapy sessions and medication adjustments, and the slow, painful work of rebuilding himself piece by piece. One day at a time, he said finally. Some days you're going to feel like giving up, but you don't. You just do the next right thing, whatever that is. Get out of bed, take a shower, eat something, call someone, go to therapy, take your medication. And eventually, those days add up into weeks, months, years. And one day you'll realize you've built something worth living for. And the guilt, the nightmares, the feeling like part of you died over there, they don't go away completely, but they get quieter. They become something you carry instead of something that crushes you. You learn to live with the ghosts instead of being haunted by them. They talked for the rest of the hour, and when Ryan left, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose, not the purpose of being a Marine, of serving your country in combat, but a different kind of purpose, using his pain to ease someone else's, turning his suffering into something constructive, honoring the fallen by helping the living. That night, like he did every November 10th, Jake wrote a letter. He didn't send it anywhere, just wrote it and put it in a drawer with all the others. To the kid I was before the Hell House. You're about to go through something that will break you. You'll kill men. You'll nearly die. You'll watch your brothers bleed and scream and break. You'll do things that haunt you for the rest of your life. But you'll survive. And 10 years later, you'll be sitting in an office, helping other broken soldiers find their way home. It won't feel like enough. You'll always wonder if you could have done more, been braver, saved more lives. But here's the truth. You did your job. You brought your brothers home, the ones who made it. You survived when survival seemed impossible, and you built something from the wreckage. The war took pieces of you that you'll never get back, pieces of your innocence, your certainty, your sense of safety in the world, but it also gave you something: understanding, compassion, the ability to sit with suffering without flinching. The knowledge that human beings can endure impossible things and still choose to keep living. 10 years later, you're not the person you were. You're scarred, damaged, fundamentally changed, but you're alive, you're helping people, you're building a life that matters. Some days that's enough, other days it's not, but you keep going anyway. The war ends when you stop fighting yourself. I'm not there yet. Maybe I'll never be. But I'm trying. And some days, that's all we can do. Still here. Still fighting. Still alive. Jake. He folded the letter, placed it in the drawer with the others, and closed it. Outside his window, San Diego went about its business. Cars honking, people laughing, life happening in all its messy, ordinary glory. A world Jake had fought to protect. A world he'd been broken trying to preserve. A world he was learning, slowly and painfully, to live in again. He looked at the photo on his desk one more time. The Hell House 6, frozen in time, young and whole and unaware of what was coming. We made it, Jake whispered to the ghosts. Not all of us, not in one piece, but we made it. He turned off his office light and walked out into the California evening. The war was still there in the dark corners of his mind, in the dreams that woke him gasping at 3 a.m., in the way he scanned parking lots for threats that didn't exist. But tonight, he could live with that. Tonight, life was enough.